Welcome, everybody. Mormonism Live. It is Wednesday, July 15th, 2026. Excited. RFM, how are you doing this evening?
Well, I'm excited too, Bill. What are you
Excellent.
excited about?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm excited about. It's this thing that, you and I both love the history of Mormonism. And every once in a while, you come across a document that you haven't spent a lot of time reading, at least in full. Maybe you've caught a little thing here, thing there from it over the years. But this week, I had the chance to go back and uh, listen to in full in 1848. I'll call it a Mormon memoir of sorts. It's Catherine Lewis, and she is in the church, really active, rubbing shoulders with the influential Mormons of the early 1840s, essentially mid 1840s. She lives with the Kimball family for a while, and she leaves the church, steps away from it. In 1848, she tells her story, and as I went through it, there were so many interesting things in there that I thought, man, this would make a really fun episode. Again, just to tell the audience, I was prepared to do something on Zion's Camp. This came across the radar. I listened to it. It only took me about 2 hours to listen to. And there were so many cool little tidbits in there that I thought, no, Zion's Camp can be done anytime. Let's get the thing that's interesting to us. And anyway, any thoughts from you before? I guess we'll just jump right into it.
Well, I went ahead. I thought it was very interesting. So I don't listen to things as well as I read them. So I read through the pamphlet. It was very interesting, I thought. And especially the fact that it's recorded so early on. It's 1848, and she's recording things that she says happened in 1844 and 1845 and 46. So very, very shortly afterward is this coming into print and publication. Now, Bill, the title of the show is The Earliest Form of the Mormon Endowment. Did you want to clarify that at all for the audience before we proceed?
Yeah, what I will say is I'm not claiming it's the earliest recounting of the endowment. There are other people a year or two earlier who do say things. But what I think she's doing is she's telling us about the earliest form of the endowment, the initial endowment as delivered by Joseph Smith and sort of memorized and re-put into the temple by Brigham Young and others. And so as people were going through the temple for the very first time in the 1840s, experiencing the endowment in its original form, I think that Catherine Lewis is describing that. And I think we can learn a lot of things from it.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Some things sound familiar. Some things sound slightly distorted, but familiar, right? In other words, she has three sets of signs and tokens. First, 1 and 2 for the Aaronic, and then just one for the patriarchal, where apparently she either collapses them because there's two Melchizedek priesthood signs, as well as 2 Aaronic in the temple. All I'm saying is that she gets the 2 Aaronic signs, but she has only 1 Melchizedek sign. And this is one of the challenges I expect that historians would have with a document such as this, is this question. Is she doing what I actually just started to do? Is she collapsing the 2 into 1 because she misremembers it? Or was that really the way it was initially, with 1 for Melchizedek? And then subsequently, it developed into 2 parts.
Yeah. And my understanding of the early saints is that they went through the temple once. And it wasn't something like the modern day Mormons where we are told and instructed and encouraged to go over and over and over again, both for ourselves and for the dead. And if I were asked to remember everything that I experienced going through for the very first time, I would struggle to remember, let's say 60 or 70% of it. And yet she comes out, and I think it'll be clear to see from her that she not only knows the members of the church who are well known, that she's rubbing shoulders with the influential Mormons of her day, but also that she is recounting the endowment closer than I would have been able to do if I would have been gone through one time and interviewed, or if I wrote my story down 2 years later. And so I think she did a really good job of doing it. And so I think it'll give us a chance to hash that out. I think as we go through it, RFM, it'll be interesting for you and I to stop after various sections and to talk about things she got right and things she got wrong, and to evaluate it as a source when we get done in its totality. But
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The other side of that coin that I just talked about is, uh, it's too easy to fall into the trap of when she gets things the way that we know that they are today or within our memory, right? That's when she has them right. And when she doesn't have it matching up with our experience, then it's wrong because there could be a mix of both. And she could be wrong about things that are the same today, and she could be right about things that are not.
Yep. And there are numerous other interesting things about her writings that we'll point to first. We'll jump into the endowment maybe about halfway through the show. We'll read that endowment uh, recounting of hers to the audience. You guys will get a chance to hear it. And then at the very end of that section, somebody else was talking about the endowment a little bit, and I put those slides in as well. And so we can kind of compare her with someone else who spoke in the 1800s to some length about what the endowment looked like. So with that, I'll put this up on the screen. Here's the thumbnail, the earliest form of the Mormon Endowment. Again, somebody else corrected me too, RFM, and I wasn't claiming that this is her recounting is the earliest telling of it, just that she is describing the earliest form of the Mormon Endowment. And I think in that way, I'm completely accurate. This comes from narrative. Let me turn my slideshow. Narrative of some of the proceedings of the Mormons, giving an account of their iniquities with particulars concerning the training of the Indians by them, description of the mode of the endowment, plurality of wives, etc., by Catherine Lewis, published by the author in 1848. And so with that, I'm going to jump in here, and I'll just note, I tried to find out more about her, and I didn't find anything. Very little is actually known about Catherine Lewis as a person outside of her own published narrative. We know she joined the church around 1841. She later traveled to Nauvoo, participated in the Nauvoo Temple endowment, and published her account in 1848 after leaving Mormonism. Beyond these basic facts, the historical record is remarkably sparse. We know little about her broader relationship with the church, her personal background, or what became of her after her publication. In Catherine Lewis's favor, though, are several important strengths. First, she's an early witness, publishing her account only a few years after the events she describes, not decades later from distant memory. Second, she regularly distinguishes between what she personally witnessed and what she learned from others, often using phrases such as "I heard," "Mrs. Kimball told me," or "I was told." And I think she truly does do a beautiful job of that, helping the audience discern about what she personally experienced and what she is a secondhand witness to. And I think that helps us to sort of figure out more about the story as well. And so that allows readers to separate the firsthand observations from reported information. Third, her detailed description of the Nauvoo Temple endowment, including the washing, anointing, new names, Garden of Eden drama, signs and tokens, the veil, penalties, priesthood grips, and progression through the kingdoms, contains numerous details that were later independently confirmed by other insider accounts. And I've got two of those accounts mentioned tonight. One of those we'll put slides up and share in some detail. Finally, her narrative repeatedly intersects with other contemporary Nauvoo sources, including Martha Brotherton. And it'll be interesting to you, the audience. It'll be interesting tonight for you to notice similarities in how she experienced Mormonism and proposals of polygamy, and what other accounts are out there that have nothing to do with her, but are Nancy Rigdon or Martha Brotherton or Helen Mar Kimball sharing their experiences and having overlap in the way that Catherine Lewis experienced her Mormonism. And then I'll just say the Nauvoo Expositor, John C. Bennett, William Clayton journals, and later temple accounts. Now, none of that proves that every claim she makes is true, but it does show that her account repeatedly aligns with an expanding body of independent evidence rather than standing alone. Anything you want to say about that?
That's a fair statement.
Great. She knows the cast of characters, so I'm going to switch here. In her writing, she mentions Joseph Smith, although she never met him personally. I don't think she comes to Nauvoo until after his death, but she mentions Joseph and Emma and Hiram. Brigham Young is really close in association to conversations that she's having. She claims that she lived with the Kimballs for a while. So Heber C. Kimball and Violet Kimball are mentioned. She mentions Helen Mar Kimball and having firsthand conversations with her. She mentions having firsthand conversations with Augusta Adams Cobb. And I want to just tell the audience, this is at least important if you were interested in the conversations that Jeremy Hoop had with RFM and I will just note that the polygamy denier theory places that instead of Joseph Smith being the carrier of polygamy and the founder of it, it's Brigham Young and those around him, including Heber C. Kimball and Violet Kimball, but also Augusta Cobb and Jeremy Hoop and the polygamy deniers often mention that Brigham Young and others, I think Kimball, go off east and end up meeting Augusta Cobb. She ends up joining the church. And in Catherine Lewis's story, she acts very much like an intermediary, and you'll see that as we get through. She mentions Henry Jacobs, and folks, if you remember Henry Jacobs, he is the way he's described is just a really faithful, valiant Mormon. And his woman that he had his eyes on and was getting married to ends up in a marriage with Joseph Smith, and then afterward, I think Brigham Young. And she essentially feels like or at least the way the story is told, is that she sort of had to make a choice. She was pressured into being a polygamous wife instead of being able to stay with Henry Jacobs. And so she moves away from Henry. And some of the writings that we have indicate that he was heartbroken. Catherine,
Zina.
please.
Zina.
Yeah, Zina Huntington Jacobs. Ziana, yeah. And Jacobs, Smith, Young, yes.
Jingleheimer Schmidt.
Yes. So she also mentions Nancy Rigdon. We'll see that in this presentation tonight. She other places, this may not come out tonight, but in other places in her documents, she mentions Willard Richards, Orson Hyde, Orson Pratt, Parley Pratt, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, George A. Smith, Amasa Lyman, Johnny Page, and Lyman White. So when you in 1848 name the full cast of characters like that, it seems at least apparent to me, and others can judge otherwise, but it seems like she really does know these people. They are a part of her memory, and she really did experience Mormonism in the midst of these characters. So anything you want to say about that, RFM?
No, thank you. I will note that Lynn, where this was published, is in Massachusetts.
Excellent. Okay, now with that, I'm going to go to the next one here. And if you remember, we had this conversation about backroom deals in our conversation around the William Clayton journals and talking about how Jeremy Hoop had discovered those and him getting ready to release them along with his book, The Clayton Conundrum. And so I'll just note here at the beginning, polygamy is presented to her with Joseph Smith being the architect of it. Now, Hoop and the other polygamy deniers would say she never met Joseph Smith. She didn't come to Nauvoo until after he died.
And both of those things are true, by the way.
Yes. And the only reason she's blaming Joseph Smith is because she's told by the Kimballs, sort of secondhand by Brigham Young and by Augusta Cobb, that that's where it originated. She doesn't actually hear it from Joseph Smith herself. She does not portray plural marriage as something Brigham Young invented. She describes it as already established under Joseph Smith, but she clearly explains the backroom deal that Clayton claimed was initiated by Smith and was used by others. Not that she's telling us those deals were made, but the way she describes her own personal experience, it at least seems clear to me that it matches up so dang closely with Clayton's recounting of the backroom deals. And also, she also speaks of, and we'll get to it here in the next slide, she also speaks of intermediary women coming to her one after the other at times to try to convince her to enter polygamy. And we've also watched in our conversations around the Clayton diaries instances where Joseph Smith sends Brigham Young to talk to Clayton. Joseph Smith sends, whoever, sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so to talk to somebody. Joseph always wants to keep himself at distance, and that pattern plays itself out in Catherine Lewis's experience as well.
Can you describe the backroom deal, what it is?
Yep, I can in the very next slide. The backroom deal is Joseph's double game tricking people with secret pacts. So this is in the William Clayton journals. Jeremy Hoop and the polygamy deniers would like you to believe that this is a late edition and not true, but that Clayton is intentionally adding this in later to create a foundation for Joseph Smith being the founder of polygamy.
That sounds like a 60s rock band. Jeremy Hoop and the Polygamy Deniers.
It would make a great band name. By the way, if a band can be named Fanny Alger, a band
really
can be named Jeremy Hoop and the Polygamy Deniers.
It'd be like on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
Bring them on. Bring on Jeremy Hoop and the Polygamy Deniers. Yay.
So in the Clayton journals, it says a month earlier, William Clayton recorded in his journal a conversation he had with Joseph Smith regarding Clayton's plural wife, Margaret Moon. Joseph Smith reportedly told him that if anyone were to raise trouble over Clayton's second wife and bring him before Joseph Smith, Joseph said, quote, "I will give you an awful scourging and probably cut you off from the church, and then I will baptize you and set you ahead as good as ever." And so it's this idea that there is one way of handling things public facing, which is I did not give anyone permission to do polygamy. But behind the scenes, it's like, yeah, you go talk to them, see if you can get them to do polygamy. But if that person or anyone else goes to the public and says, Joseph Smith is teaching this and I saw so-and-so do it, then I'm going to disfellowship you, treat you like as if I'm punishing you. And then at some future point, I'll bring you back into the church. Any thoughts from you on this?
It's so simple. It's hard to believe this is the first time it's ever been thought of.
Yeah, no, if you aren't a healthy person, this is exactly the way you carry out wanting to do things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yes. If it weren't such a serious subject, it sounds like a Tom Sawyer exploit.
Yeah. So Joseph was willing to use intimidation and deception to protect his secret plural marriage pacts. And so with that, I'll jump here into this. I'll read this purple set. Each section is color coded. I'll take this purple one RFM and then I'll let you read the next one so I can take a breather. But this is all Catherine Lewis's exact words, just copied and pasted straight from her writing. So she says, in the year 1841, I became acquainted with some of the Mormons, joined their church, and believed them to be a holy people, zealous of good works. Yeah, me too, Catherine. 2 years passed on. I was still strong in the faith until the plurality of wives was taught. So she's indicating that this is 1843. She says, I, from the first mention of it, opposed it and told the elder it was the doctrine of the devil. But I was sharply rebuked by one of the elders who said, ought we not to receive everything Joseph saith? No, said I. Joseph is a man subject to like passions as ourselves. Said the elder, this is a direct revelation immediately from heaven. I replied, I could not receive anything without a revelation for myself. The book of doctrine gave me this privilege, etc. So she's saying, like, look, I don't need to do any of this. I'm not doing polygamy unless God himself communicates to me that it's true, because otherwise I just don't trust this. And this person, again, is blaming Joseph Smith for where this teaching comes from.
And we're presuming that she meant to say the book of Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah, I don't know that for sure. That would be my assumption too, but I don't know that for sure. But I would assume she knows her scriptures well enough to not be confusing the book of doctrine, which makes sense as in being the Doctrine and Covenants, versus, say, the Book of Mormon or something else.
Unless she's distinguishing the first part, which was the lectures on faith.
Yeah, and she might. She might be doing that. She continues. She says, I was then cautioned not to tell this conversation. So somebody comes to her.
Who was almost certainly Brigham Young.
Yeah, wants to get her to do polygamy and then tells her, that she's not allowed to pass that conversation along, that it's
Hmm.
kept secret.
Mm.
She said, I next heard the doctrine of plurality of wives was put down, and that the teacher it was under dealings in the church. Now, I don't know what she meant exactly there.
And that the teacher of it was under dealings in the church. In other words, he's getting in trouble, I think.
Yeah. So it sounds again like this backroom deal. Thus, things went on well for a season until one returned home who had been to Nauvoo. She sent for me, saying she had something to tell me which was glorious. She said she would tell me under the injunction of secrecy. So, again, when I think about early Nauvoo polygamy and all the stories associated with it, the Martha Brotherton story, Nancy Rigdon, Helen Mar Kimball, in all of these instances, the woman is told, almost always not by Joseph Smith, but by someone else. And that person, unless they just jump on board and say, yeah, I'll do that, if there's any resistance, they're immediately put under some sort of injunction of secrecy. And this person here, who's now talking to Catherine Lewis, says she's under the injunction of secrecy.
You know
And
what other kinds of people put people under injunctions of secrecy, Bill?
I know they do in the Mormon Temple when we do the endowment.
They do. I'm thinking even more sinister than that. I'll let you figure that one out. I think everybody out there has a pretty good idea what I'm talking about. People who tell you not to tell.
Yeah, child abusers tell you not to tell.
To put a fine point on it, yes.
Yeah. Generally, people who want to do harm in secret tell you not to tell. But I do find it interesting that this person who's talking to Catherine is claiming to be under the injunction of secrecy, yet she's talking to Catherine. And when you understand the early history, it seems like so many of these conversations take place because some other party said, go to that person. You know, you're under the injunction of secrecy, but not with them. Your job is to go tell that person
Mhm.
about plural marriage and try to convince them to do it.
Mm.
So she goes, I replied, I could not promise before knowing. So she said, I will tell you things, but only if you'll also go under the injunction of secrecy. And she said, I could not promise before knowing, which is a common sense thing that most of us approach things with generally, like, hey, I'm not promising anything until I know what we're talking about. So after a little pause, she says, quote, the plurality of wives is true. Now, this is her putting it in quotes. So she's telling us, as far as she can remember, this is exactly what that person said. The plurality of wives is true. I have brought an invitation to you from one of the 12, and do not refuse, for you know not what you will lose if you do. If you are not satisfied with him, there are 2 others, and you can have your choice of either. They stand higher than he does. So this is not Brigham Young, because there are multiple people who are higher. Again,
Mhm.
this is 18, maybe 30 or 1843. So Joseph Smith might still be alive at this time. So it's not Joseph Smith either. And by the way the story unfolds, my guess is that it's Heber C. Kimball.
Mm.
Um, you can have your choice of either. So there's 2 other people higher than this person. If you don't like this person, you can have your choice of the other 2. They stand higher than he does. And if you take either of these, you will be highly exalted, and all your friends, both dead and living, will be benefited thereby. So there's that.
Who
She
wouldn't want to benefit your friends living and dead?
Yeah, but see, this also connects, right, to the idea of like Helen Mar Kimball getting promises that her whole family will be saved and receive salvation because she makes this decision. And that shows up in other conversations around Joseph Smith's polygamy with women as well, where people are promised not only their own salvation, but the salvation of their family if they make the decision to enter into polygamy. And so she continues, again, all her words. She says, they professed this order would save the human family, dead or alive, and that it would bring the relatives of such as made the sacrifice forth in the first resurrection.
Numero uno.
I told her it did not look right, or words to that effect. She said, make it a subject of prayer, and you will receive an evidence. I have an evidence in answer to prayer. And again, every part of this narrative reminds me of some other story in church history. Here I'm left with Lucy Walker, even Helen Mar Kimball to an extent, where Lucy Walker is given 24 hours to make a decision, told that she'll get an answer. And even when she doesn't get that answer, she's given 24 more hours. Otherwise, the gates of heaven are closed against her. This has that same kind of feel to it. She continues. She says, my views on prayer are these. Some people set their hearts on things and pray for their desires. The Lord is pleased to give it unto them, as he did the quails unto the children of Israel.
You get that reference, Bill?
Well, I know quail. This when Moses travels into the desert for 40 years, and one of the moments I think he calls down food or something, and birds drop out of the sky, don't they?
Well, this is one of the two tellings, but the one that she's referring to is when the children of Israel say, we've had it with this freaking manna, we want real meat. So all these quails go by, they catch the quails, they eat them, and then they die. Not the quails die too, but then the children of Israel who eat them die because they were so freaking ungrateful. So I think that's the reference she's making here when she says, my views on prayer are these. Some people set their hearts on things and pray for their desires. The Lord is pleased to give it unto them, as he did the quails unto the children of Israel. In other words, this freaking plural marriage thing. You're going to choke and die on it, you guys.
Yeah, and you get the answer that you want rather than God's answer anyway. Right. Now she resumed, quote, those two men are on their way here, one of whom expects an answer from you, unquote.
No pressure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Tons of pressure. Right. After considerable conversation on the subject, which is useless to mention, she then said, quote, if you tell anyone that I have told you these things, I will deny it and throw the lie on you. That's exactly what Joseph Smith did in the backroom deal. He said, Clayton, here's what's going on. You can go ahead and try to get yourself that plural wife. But if that comes out into the public, I will deny it and I will throw the lie on you. She continues, she says, this I thought was jest at first, but I soon learned they were commanded to lie if they were exposed. And they sought opportunities when no other person was present to teach this doctrine, which if divulged, they must deny. Yeah, to me, this matches up so perfect that once I read this, again, I listened to the narrative about Smith telling Clayton this deal, but then I see it here, and I hear inklings of it in other places, and it becomes clear to me that this is how plural marriage was enacted. This is how the brethren who wanted to do plural marriage went about getting women to do it, and then getting those women to get other women to do it, was with this, go do it in secret when you're by yourself with that person. But if it comes out, you're going to deny it. And if it goes any further than that, we're going to throw you under the bus.
And that's what Joseph Smith did with Nancy Rigdon at first, wasn't it?
Yeah. Again, I didn't cover that. It's been a lot of years since I covered the Nancy Rigdon story with Jonathan Streeter.
Well, and she went out and said that he just propositioned me, and he started saying that she's a liar and he did not, and she's a harlot, and who would listen to her and who would believe her.
Yeah. Ruining her reputation.
Yeah.
So I'll just know this is the end of this section, but I'll just say, can you feel the social pressure that would be on any one of these women? Catherine Lewis had better boundaries and more value of her own self-worth so as to stand up to these things. But I can only imagine the amount of pressure that not only Catherine felt, but every woman in early Mormonism, that this unfolded this way for them. Can you see how prophetic authority was used to override individual judgment? Do you notice how polygamy is framed as a test of loyalty? I think we all have to sit with these stories and go, what what did Joseph Smith's polygamy look like? And even for the polygamy deniers, what did Brigham Young's polygamy look like? There's that. So, do you feel I can sort of set this up, or you can if you want, and then I'll have you read the account. It's up to you either way.
Well, I think that what you're saying, and add anything you want or correct me, that it was the standard operating procedure in approaching a woman that you wanted to propose. If you're Joseph Smith or one of his cohorts, was to not approach them personally, at least not at first, but to send someone else as an intermediary to relay the proposal. And that intermediary was more often than not a woman.
Yes. And notice how this always lets the man avoid the degree of accountability that would be required for you to do the unhealthy thing for yourself. And it puts the burden on the intermediary to feel the pressure, the stress of trying to get the other woman to agree to adhere to plural marriage, to agree to the proposal of the man. And if it doesn't go well, that intermediary suffers as much as anyone in that process. In other words, I think it's plural marriage with religious coercion is abusive anyway, but the intermediary being manipulated into acting as such puts such a burden on her where she takes the responsibility of making this work so that the man can get away from the responsibility of making it work and can keep his credibility, his image by saying, I never had those conversations. Whoever said that's lying. It really does allow the man in these situations to take a safe position while doing the unhealthy thing.
Do you think part of it is also to make it more likely that the recipient will say yes to the proposal to have a woman involved in conveying it?
Sure, that plays a part, but that's a separate thing from how egregiously unethical it is to set it up in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're upping your odds, I guess, because if a woman's conveying the proposal, then this woman at least must be okay with it. Yeah.
I'll say too, I mean, they've done studies in the modern day where they have men walk up to women and say, hey, would you go on a date with me and see what percentage of women say yes? Would you go home with me? What percentage of women would say yes? Would you have sex with me? What percentage of women would say yes? And very few women will say sex to a man who's approaching her. Whereas if a woman is approaching a man will say yes, a whole bunch of times, a high percentage of times. But as you're pointing out, to have the intermediary not only be a woman, but a woman who's currently in polygamy, as you point out, I think it increases the odds of the woman saying yes exponentially.
Yes. Well, that's why I always sent my sister to go ask women to have sex with me.
Yeah, that's right. That's what you should do.
Worked like a charm, let me tell you. I feel okay saying that because I actually don't have a sister. Rebecca Biblioteca is the closest thing I have to a sister. She's the sister I never had.
All right, I'm going to flip this and I'll let you read what Catherine Lewis wrote about these intermediary messengers on behalf of the men who wanted plural marriage.
Okay, she says, I heard a woman say, after she was sealed, married to one of the 12, I cannot pray as I used to do, is what this woman said. I cannot pray as I used to do. It seems as if I must pray to my latter husband. I told him so, and he said that was right, for he was my savior. So when she's saying she was sealed to one of the 12, that means I'm guessing polygamously. And if not, at the very least, that's what she means when she says, I cannot pray as I used to do. It seems as if I must pray to my latter husband. In other words, the one who's one of the 12.
Yeah. So it'll become clear what parts have to do with polygamy in the following slides, but I'll at least note this to me reminds me of the promise in the temple to obey for the women to obey their husbands as they hearken unto God. And it seems like whether there was an early teaching in the church that the women must pray through the man, or whether this husband took it upon himself to create that dynamic, it seems like either way, the permission is based in the temple promises that women used to make in the temple just a few years ago, all the way back to its beginning.
Okay. So, if this is correct, there was at least one member of the 12 at the time who told his wife that she needed to pray to him. Or it says to him, not through him, but to him. And I guess he'll pass the good word along. I thought, writes Catherine Lewis, I thought while she was speaking, this was strange doctrine, for they call their husbands their lords and masters. One of those women said to me, I hope you will have a lord and master before many days. She laid a snare for me, but through the mercy of God, I escaped. Many young and inexperienced women have been enticed away by women chosen for the purpose of furnishing brides for their lords. That's it right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that is one indication of that intermediary. These women who are approaching are doing it under assignment. All right, you can go ahead and flip those, by the way.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, this is financial exploitation and trapping converts.
Yeah, and this one was interesting because the words she claims she heard are so unhealthy. And it's the first time I heard this framed this way. But it's this idea that the brethren getting women to enter polygamy would also get them to turn over all of their financial resources. By the way, Smith did that, we believe, with the Lawrence sisters. Took their inheritance, took some of the monies that they had, and left them way more desolate than he found them in terms of their financial resources from what they inherited from their father dying. But in this instance, the priesthood leader here talking indicates to Catherine, at least the teaching she heard, is that the brethren would try to get women to turn over their financial resources so that they wouldn't be able to get away. They'd be sort of stuck. And so while the writer was at Nauvoo, and again, these are all her words, Kimball came into the room and said, quote, I have been to Ruth and Abigail and have got all their money. That is the way to save folks, unquote. And what an interesting way to sort of take an unhealthy thing and then apply like a positive motivation to it so that you can justify it in your own head. And so if they don't have money, they can't leave the church, they can't get away from polygamy, and that's a great way to save them. So she goes, I asked, why so? Again, Kimball, and again, it becomes obvious when you read her stuff that she's talking about Heber C. Kimball, but she says, why so? He replied, when folks come to Nauvoo, having money by them, if anything happens which does not suit them, they will go off. But if we get their money, they cannot go, and we save them. Any thoughts from you on how dirty that is, and then to frame it as if it's a positive thing?
Well, it's diabolical, actually. Look, my reading of the New Testament is this. Jesus didn't like people who were mean to other people. He really didn't like people who were religious and were mean to other people. And he especially didn't like the leaders of his church. I believe he was a Pharisee. The leaders of his church who were being mean to other people and being wicked. But the thing that pissed Jesus off the most was when the leaders of his church were mean and cruel to other people in the name of God. That's what really cooked Jesus's bacon. And that's exactly what I'm seeing here, which is we're going to rob these women and take their money in the name of God, which makes it fine. By the way, it's not as if they're not engaged in this whole polygamy thing in the name of God as well.
Yeah, 100%. And so when we go to the next slide, the conversation continues. Another time, Kimball boasted of an exploit he had just performed, having been more successful than his fellows. He said, quote, I have been to an old maid and obtained all her money. A number have tried to get it, but without success. But when she took out her purse to count the money and let me have it, she wept, and tears fell upon it while counting. He laughed during this recital. And when I read this, what I was struck by, what apologists always do with the Helen Mar Kimball story is they go, look, Joseph Smith talked to Helen Mar's father, Heber C. Kimball. He talked to Helen Mar's mother, Violet. And they trusted Joseph Smith so much, and they saw so much good in the prophet that they agreed happily to let their 14-year-old daughter enter an intimate relationship with Joseph Smith. And me, I sit back and go, what kind of father and mother would do that? And I will tell you, the more I've read about Heber C. Kimball, including this account, the more I'm like, oh, he's not really a healthy person himself. And he's eager to participate in these activities. It's not that I'm just taking Catherine Lewis's word for it. It's that over the last year, diving deeper into some of Heber C. Kimball and his character and the things he said, he seems to me to be an unhealthy person who's trying to figure out how to get the same benefits the other men are getting from polygamy.
I expect there's a reason that he and Brigham Young were such fast friends.
Yeah. So he laughed during this recital. Whether the old maid ever received anything for her money, I have no means of knowing at present. But Ruth and Abigail were obliged to go to St. Louis and work in families. Many such cases might be told and readily proved, but as honesty is not a very essential article of Mormon faith, I leave this subject for the present. So there's that one.
I think it is an article of Mormon faith. I think is it the 13th article?
Yeah, we believe in being honest, chaste, benevolent, all that kind of stuff, right?
I thought it was an article.
Yeah. I think at least tongue in cheek, she's indicating I had enough experience with the Mormons to know that they are not that honest. And by the way, I've got enough experience with Mormons to know that they are not that honest. So
it's ironic. It's an article of their faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like on one hand, you have curriculum, theology, doctrinal statements that tell you to be honest. And on the other hand, your leaders have given you permission subtly, time and time again, that lying for the Lord is perfectly okay. And they do it themselves.
It's actually a virtue.
Yeah. So this next issue is that Lewis connects the pressure applied on her to the happiness letter. I thought that was interesting. Do you mind reading this one?
Sure thing. From the time, again, Catherine Lewis's words, from the time Mrs. Cobb, that's Augusta, first introduced the subject of plurality of wives, until the time of which I am now writing, my mind was unsettled about it. They had so much scripture intermixed and interpreted in such manner as to make it appear right. It was almost impossible to refute their arguments. Besides, they professed immediate revelation from heaven and a commandment from God to take wives. But there was an article in the doctrines of the church that every person should have an evidence for him or herself, which article I ever claimed as my right. When anything was said to me on the subject, my answer was, I have not the evidence that it is right for me. But things were approaching to a crisis. I was troubled in mind because I must soon say yea or nay to Kimball, Heber C, or some of his myrmidons, and be blind followers. Had they not claimed what is before stated, viz., i.e., an immediate revelation, and that by an angel? I should not have hesitated to have said as I did at first. Now, I think what she's saying there is basically, if they hadn't claimed that this was a revelation from an angel, I wouldn't have hesitated, okay? But they're saying that this is from an angel from God, so even if I can't, see this in the scriptures, what if it's true? So I could not say at that time, as she has since, it is the doctrine of the devil. My spirits became depressed, lest these things should be as they represented them, i.e., from God. And if I say nay, I might be found raising my voice against the Lord's anointed, right? Which to my mind was no small thing. So she feels like she is on the horns of a dilemma. She decides to go to Nauvoo, I think, and see what things are like there. In conversation with Kimball afterwards on the subject, he evaded my questions and turned the conversation upon something else. I therefore wrote a letter addressed to him explaining my views and expected an answer. By the way, I'm sorry, I think she is in Nauvoo already. I wrote a letter to Heber C. Kimball explaining my views and expected an answer, but none had been received from that day to this. So, no answer on this letter from Heber C. Kimball. I know not of any letters being written by any of the apostles on this subject since the notorious letter to Nancy Rigdon. Okay, there it is, Bill.
Yeah,
Why might the apostles have stopped writing letters on the subject of plural marriage?
it seems obvious because it bites you in the ass if you do that.
Even if you go to all the trouble of writing at the bottom, please destroy this once you've read it. Sometimes they don't do that. Can you imagine?
Yeah. And so you're not going to risk it anymore. And so nobody's going to put these things into writing. But luckily, they can still visit in person from time to time.
Yes, it's almost like they don't keep journals anymore, the apostles, as part of church policy. And you're not supposed to record them when they're speaking. And I think we found out why, even recently.
You're not supposed to record prophets, seers, and revelators when they speak the word of God.
Yes.
That's a strange thing. What strange times we live in.
That's how sacred it is. For fear of further exposure, Heber C. Kimball probably thought by not writing, my mind would be troubled, thereby giving him the advantage over me. His silence caused me still further to doubt, for had they received such a commandment of such importance as the salvation of my own soul through polygamy, right? And that of all my ancestors, it was their duty as servants of the Most High to have informed me. So why isn't he talking to me about it if it's really what he's claiming it to be? That's not making any sense to her. I had left Heber C. Kimball's house, but lived in the neighborhood. About 3 weeks after I had sent the letter, I went to Heber C. Kimball's house to work. When Kimball said, it's K here in the manuscript. When K said, "Sister, how do you feel about matters now? You do not feel so well since you sent me that letter," acknowledging he'd received it. I replied, "You are mistaken. It relieved my mind, and I feel much better." No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead first.
I was just going to read the last line. No more was said at that time, for others were in the room. That's why he's talking such cryptic words, right? It's their own code. It's a code. It's the Snow and Friends code.
It's also obvious from that line, "Sister, how do you feel about matters now? You do not feel so well since you sent me that letter." It's him making an assumption about the way that he handled not writing her back, that he was leaving her with not getting an answer, and that she was going to feel a lot of turmoil inside, not being able to resolve the problem. And so he's showing up asking her, like, "I bet you felt a lot of discomfort, didn't you?" And her going like, "No, like, if this was from God, I expect you to deal with it head on. And because you didn't, I made peace with it. So no, I don't feel the way you thought I would." But it shows on his part an effort to manipulate her feelings and to set her up to hopefully feel things so that he would have the upper hand.
And hopefully be more pliable.
Yep. This next one, Lewis shares that the process, and again, we're skipping around a bunch. Go read this yourself. I'll make sure that once the show's over that the account is in the show notes. You can both read it like RFM did. If you have Audible or Amazon Music, I believe you can listen to it for free through Audible. But in this next section, Lewis shares that the process that once a potential plural wife had been talked to by another person, again, this is that intermediary, often a woman already in polygamy, would tell the man that it had been done. In other words, the plural, the husband who wants to marry a bunch of women would find one of his plural wives or someone else who's been involved in plural marriage. He would send them as an intermediary to another woman. Of course, we've already talked about that. But this new step is that once that woman had had the conversation with the potential plural wife, she then, of course, goes back as the messenger and communicates that the task has been completed. And the reason this is unique to me is that the more moments we can demonstrate that something almost certainly is happening behind the scenes, it substantiates the fact that something is happening behind the scenes. Any thoughts from you on this before I go into it?
Point of order. So in this case, the middleman is a woman.
Yes, I'm saying middleman because it's a phrase that we use, but you used intermediary earlier, and I think that works just as well. But that the plural wife who's already doing polygamy is utilized by the man to go to the woman as the messenger and try to get her to enter into polygamy. And one of the ways that we would know that there is a behind the scenes conversation where this woman is being sent is if we get an indication that she went back to the man and gave him the message.
Right. And so then he comes back. Yeah, got it.
So it says, I saw her several times before the men came and told her my mind was confused and that I had no evidence it was right. She said, quote, the reason you are so confused is because you have no head, for man is the head of a woman, unquote. So the reason this doesn't make sense to you is because you're just a dumb woman and you need to be a man to have the brain and intellect and spirit to understand these things. How confident?
I was going to say, sounds like she has a pretty good head to me.
Yeah. Yeah. She's the one in the room being like, not going to fool me here. But they see that stubbornness as a weak mind, unable to see the truth through things. And so she said, that is the way they pervert scripture to suit themselves. And many are deceived thereby.
Right. Because, of course, that's a reference to a scripture. Probably Paul.
She continues, she says, after some time, the men of whom we had been speaking came to Boston to attend the conference. I also went to the conference. And while there, one of the men came in. He was introduced to me and commenced the conversation by asking if Sister Cobb had said anything to me on the subject of plurality of wives and wished to know my views, etc. Right there to me is the dead giveaway that he's doing the follow-up after he's already been told. Again, if a woman is talking about polygamy independently, then the man doesn't really know that these conversations are happening. Yet he knows that Sister Cobb likely had a conversation with her about polygamy when I think in reality, he certainly knows Cobb had a conversation about polygamy.
I wish that you were being a little more clear on names, because it's not clear who this man is that she's talking about, who comes from Boston, who comes to Boston. And, you know, I know that Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball were doing missionary work out there at the time. On the other hand, Heber C. Kimball made sense when you talked about the couple who were above him, right? Who also wanted her. On the other hand, but she mentions Kimball and his name all over the place. But in this story, she's not mentioning the name, which makes me wonder if it's Kimball.
Yeah, my best understanding, again, I don't know this for sure. She does a really good job of trying to keep sort of confidences for whatever reason. My hunch is that this is Kimball, but Sister Cobb would have a connection, more importantly, to Brigham Young, but also to Kimball, as the two of them were out east. And so I'll just note, he answered, Sister Cobb and I have conversed about this matter, but as yet I have no evidence that it is. I'm sorry, that's what she said. So Catherine Lewis said, Sister Cobb and I have conversed about this matter, but as yet I have no evidence that it is right. Then he said, quote, you can have a few days to think it over. That also is a dead giveaway. That's a dead giveaway that Cobb had the conversation with her.
Now, how do you mean?
Now he comes in to put a time limit. This story, what seems like the most reasonable way to interpret this story is that this person, assuming it's Kimball, that this person talks to Augusta Cobb, sends her as an intermediary to talk to uh,
Catherine.
Catherine Lewis. And the conversation takes place. Augusta Cobb goes back to presumably Kimball, says, I've had the conversation. So now it's your turn. Now you can go have the conversation with her. You can follow up. And he shows up, this person, again, presumably Kimball, and she says, yeah, I've talked to Sister Cobb, but as yet I have no evidence that it's right. And now he's following up, giving her just a few days to think it over. The only reason he's approaching her is because he wants her as a plural wife. The only reason Augusta Cobb is going to talk to her is because he wants her as a plural wife.
Oh, yes, yes.
It becomes clear to me that while he's indicating he doesn't know if Sister Cobb did have the conversation, that he seems to really clearly know that Sister Cobb had the conversation. It's not that he's admitting that. It's that this is how the game would be played. This is how you would get an entry back into the conversation, is to go, hey, did Sister Cobb happen to have a conversation with you? Knowing that Sister Cobb did have a conversation with you. And now I can initiate the conversation, knowing certain parts on my side that are not known on the other.
The part that drives me crazy about this is presumably Heber C. Kimball, or whoever the son of a bitch was, who then says, you can have a few days to think it over. Who the hell do you think you are? And I really hope that when you switch slides, the next line is Catherine Lewis writing, so I grabbed my dagger out of my garter belt and plunged it into his right eye.
Yeah, a little Shawshank Redemption, huh?
I hope so. That's going to be next.
Yeah, I don't think it is. But that whole, you can have a few days to think it over, it strikes me again that almost certainly time constraints were one of the tricks that Joseph Smith and others taught to everyone, all the men, to utilize when trying to convince the woman to do it. By the way, Joseph Smith would have learned a lot about the impact of time constraints back in his treasure digging days. What kinds of ways can you apply pressure and leverage to people to get them to capitulate to what you want them to do and to be? This strikes me as a trick that Smith would have known all too well. And he uses it with Lucy Walker. And here, Kimball, Young, or somebody else uses it with Catherine Lewis. It is part of the game. It's the rules of the game that they play by, because it shows up more than once, more than twice. It shows up all over the place.
Let's get to the dagger in the eye scene.
In a conversation with him some days afterward, the same subject was renewed. I told him my mind was as formerly. I did not, or could not, see it right for me to acquiesce in his opinions. He said, quote, I am going to Baltimore. Expect to meet my wife and shall bring her on here, meaning Boston. You may see her. When you have talked with her, you will say all is right. Now he's telling her what answer she has to give. It's not even up to her anymore. Whilst he was in Baltimore, news reached them of the death of Smith, which caused the 12 to hasten home. So the matter was postponed until I went to Nauvoo. So there's that. And so no dagger, RFM, although, as you point out, whoever this dirty scoundrel is, it is completely inappropriate to handle the situation. Even if plural marriage is of God, this is not the way that God would enact plural marriage.
I'll have to wait for the Quentin Tarantino version of this.
Yeah. I tried to get away, but they just keep bringing me back in. Yeah. Say hello to my little friends. All right. So this one here, marriage to Native American women. We talk about the moment in history where Joseph Smith encouraged, I think, Martin Harris and others to marry Native American women, and that it would be part of sort of bringing the gospel or the plan of salvation about collectively for the human race. And so in this one, Catherine Lewis reports teachings that marrying Native women would fulfill Book of Mormon prophecy, making them white and delightsome, It illustrates how race, theology, and plural marriage intersected in early marriage thought. And I'm wondering if you'll take this one.
Mrs. Heber C. Kimball told me her husband had then 40 adopted children. Oh, this gives a chilling take on this whole law of adoption, doesn't it, Bill?
It
This
does.
was the thing that surprised me the most. So Mrs. Heber C. Kimball told me her husband had then 40 adopted children who were bound to obey their parents in all things. So this is the description of what the law of adoption entails. You are adopted as a child, which means you must do everything that your father tells you to do. If Heber C. Kimball chooses to take the wife of one of the sons, his adopted sons, they must submit without murmuring, for they are bound by oath to obey forever. And I'm understanding this is what Heber C. Kimball's wife is telling her. If Heber C. Kimball commands one of the sons to take an Indian squaw, my apologies, to wife, to bring about the wonderful work of making the Indians a white and delightsome people as predicted in the Book of Mormon, he must do so or incur the penalty of their law.
We might want to pause and go like, come on, maybe that's not true. And maybe it's not. But what catches us off guard is this idea of him telling his adopted sons that if they have to give Kimball one of their wives, then they have to do it. They have to submit to such. And I go, is it really that strange for these kinds of family things to happen in Mormonism? Joseph Smith marries numerous sets of sisters. He marries a mother-daughter, the Sessions mother and Sessions daughter. I just don't think it's above and beyond Joseph Smith or these early men in Mormonism based on the way that they were dishonest, based on the way that they lived out their lives and the choices that they made, to put it past them. And, you and I have said this before, generally we should give the benefit of the doubt unless there's significant evidence pointing otherwise. But in Mormonism, I think it should work the opposite way. The leaders of this religion, Joseph Smith himself and the modern day folks leading it, have been dishonest on so many occasions that if I'm sort of in that gray area to either believe them or to think they've done something deeply dishonest or unhealthy, from here on out, the rest of my life, I'm going to go with the latter. And it's the church's job and the historian's job to prove otherwise to me. Any thoughts from you there?
No, there's more that is attached to the story, which I'm looking forward to get to because it even gets worse.
Oh, I don't have the slides any further of this. Oh, I've got the next.
Okay.
So what do you remember offhand what it was?
I don't. I'll see if it comes to me, but definitely the pamphlet is a good read and it gives this whole different take on the law of adoption. I have been trained to see the law of adoption is really nothing more than an excuse for polygamy. In other words, Joseph Smith is just trying to make this, all these familial kinds of connections. And it's not just wives, it's also children and the adoption and all that stuff, right? In other words, it's a way to cloud the polygamy issue on the part of apologists. But now I'm seeing it as something more sinister. And the problem is that it makes sense. In other words, why are you doing this otherwise? Is it just for the afterlife, or is there some benefit in the here and now? And apparently, if this is correct, there's a benefit in the here and now, which is now you have a pool from which new wives for you are produced. It could be your adopted son, sealed, adopted in the temple by ceremony of the priesthood, one of your son's wives, and I'm sure if that's true, you could have your son's daughters as well. And these are simply grown men. They could be your age. They could be older than you, who are sealed to you as an adopted son.
Yeah, and by the way, I agree with you. It's one of the things that stood out to me, especially since we did the Fanny Alger episode, is that Joseph is using adoption as a way to create public facing language that allows people to go like, ah, he sealed her as his daughter.
Mhm.
It allows the girls who are being adopted to be innocently brought in sort of as a frog in a slow pot of boiling water. I can bring you in first and treat you as a daughter. We can talk about theology around adopting you. But in the end, it ends with Joseph having an intimate relationship with the person. And somebody here, I put it up on the screen, the adoption ruse. It does seem like a ruse meant to create distance so that the public doesn't come after him, and to create familiarity, which is going to be more likely to bring the young child, even closer and more susceptible and gullible to being brought in as a plural wife. I think you're right, RFM. It's just a trick. And the apologists want to cling to it as if it solves a problem. And they want to pretend like, oh, well, there was this going on and there was that going on, and we don't know which it was.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew which it was, because it was both.
Dynastic sealings is what they're pleased to call them.
Yeah. Meanwhile, it's just a trick to get gullible women into intimate relationships with Joseph Smith and the other men. All right, so there's that. This one here is where Helen Mar Kimball appears. Catherine Lewis discusses Helen's marriage and presents it as evidence of how young women became involved in the systems. And I'll just note some of the details here do differ a little bit from Helen's own later account. That doesn't necessarily make it false, but I would think we should at least sort of take in this story with a bit of a grain of salt. But the inclusion of it itself is historically significant, and she does claim that she had a firsthand conversation with many of the Kimballs, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we'll get to it here in a second, she has a conversation with Helen Mar's mother about this. Yeah, it says that there. Do you mind taking this one?
Sure. Catherine Lewis writes, the 12 took Joseph's wives after his death. Kimball and Young took most of them. The daughter of Kimball was one of Joseph's wives. That's Helen Mar. I heard her say to her mother, I will never be sealed to my father. Okay, what the hell is going on here? Tell me you got that wrong. I will never be sealed to my father.
Yeah.
Is someone asking Helen Mar Kimball to be sealed to Heber C. Kimball?
Yeah, I don't know. I think at the very least, she sees her dad marrying all of Joseph's wives after Smith's death. And she at least is expressing an internal fear inside her head, at a minimum, that she's concerned that because her dad is marrying all of the wives of the dead prophet, that he's going to want to marry her too. And if the previous story is true, she would have seen her dad adopting all of these people in and then taking their wives. So at least she's got some fear that's based in a rationale of what's going on around her.
Mm. Okay, so this is Catherine Lewis saying that she heard Helen Mar Kimball say to her mother, I will never be sealed to my father, meaning as a wife. By the way, is that parenthetical comment in the text itself?
Yeah, I'm almost certain I just copied and pasted. I don't think I added anything in to add clarity.
Okay. So I will never be sealed to my father, meaning as a wife, and I would never have been sealed, married to Joseph, had I known it was anything more than ceremony. I was young, and they deceived me by saying the salvation of our whole family depended on it. I say again, I will never be sealed to my father. No, I will sooner be damned and go to hell if I must. Neither will I be sealed to Brigham Young. And that's the end of the alleged quote from Helen Mar Kimball to her mom. The apostles said they only took Joseph's wives to raise up children, carry them through to the next world, and there deliver them up to him. By so doing, they should gain his approbation, and etc.
Um,
Is the part where you're saying it's different from Helen Marr's version that she was deceived? That she felt that she had been deceived?
yeah, I think the language here is a little strong, but we do have Helen Marr saying something along the lines of, I wouldn't have married Joseph if I knew it was anything more than ceremony. And uh, apologists today want to sort of go like, well, we don't really know what that means. So I think, at least in part, we have to grant that Catherine Lewis's story has some accuracy to it. And when she says in this, in this account that she wouldn't have married Joseph if she knew it was anything more than ceremony, means that she now knows it was something more than ceremony, almost certainly not just to do with the life hereafter, but instead have to do with romance and sex in this life.
Mm. So the implication is that she was deceived into it by thinking it was just ceremony and there wouldn't be any consummation.
And in fact, there was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, a couple of other little stories before we get into the endowment. Lewis hears of allegations of resource hoarding. To some, they said on condition, again, her words, to some, they said on condition they would leave in the spring of 1846. Again, this is going from Nauvoo out west. All were pacified. But when speaking to the common people at Nauvoo, they said it was a revelation from God that they should journey into the wilderness in order that this passage of scripture might be fulfilled. The church shall come up out of the wilderness, terrible as an army with banners. That's a very different way to use that scripture than Terrell Givens uses it. I'll just say that. It was said there was church property enough to fit all out. But when the 12 and their associates went, they managed to take most of the property and secured the rest, leaving those behind to help themselves if they could. So she's saying that, look, when we left Nauvoo to go out west to Utah, the leaders of the church promised everybody that there would be supplies enough for everyone to get there and to have what they needed to do it. And then the leaders leave early and they take all the things with them, and whatever they didn't take, they secured with others. And so they left the saints to be barren in going west, not having enough supplies as everyone else, and not having enough supplies as the leadership in getting out there. She continues, she says, now they endeavor to obtain money under the pretense of alleviating the distress of their suffering brethren. I doubt if they receive one farthing benefit from all which has been collected. In other words, now they're asking for money in order to supply the saints that weren't supplied. And she doubts that that money would actually be used for that purpose. Now, she's bitter. Is this story true? Who knows? But I'll at least say that, again, that's her account, and that's what she said happened. So,
Well, I doubt that there would have been enough church property to fit everybody out who is heading west.
no. And you can surely bet your rear end that Brigham Young and a few of the other top guys had plenty more than everyone else.
Well, he ended up with plenty more in Utah, didn't he?
He sure did. I think he became Utah's first millionaire. Yeah. Okay, so this next part is the earliest form of the apostolic charge. This was what Hugh B. Brown said is, we discuss things, whatever the majority is, that is now become the official opinion of the entire group. And when you walk out of the room, you act as if you made the decision yourself, even if you were in the minority and disagreed. And then she gives a description of a seer stone that I've never heard of before. Would you mind reading this one?
Their manner of receiving revelations is somewhat singular. If an apostle hears anything said or a dream be told which pleases him, he goes into the quorum of the 12 who take counsel upon it. If it suits them, straightway a revelation is promulgated, because, say they, the voice of the 12 is the voice of the church, and the voice of the church is the word of God. Vox Populi.
I want to stop here for just a moment. Does it ever strike you, because this isn't the first time I've thought this thought, the brethren have code language for when God speaks. It doesn't seem clear here the way I'm using it, but I think what I'm saying is at least in fact truth. And it's that the brethren know that Jesus doesn't show up in the room every Thursday when they meet in the temple. Yet they're constantly telling the members of the church that God is talking to them. God is speaking. And you also have these moments where they go, the voice of the 12 is the voice of the church, and the voice of the church is the word of God.
Mm.
And when you use that logic, when you walk out of the room with the 12 and they've made a decision, and by the way, again, first presidency vanishes, quorum of the 12 takes leadership for years, and then from that point going forward, the first presidency comes out of the 12 and really is a group of 15 apostles rather than a member of, a first presidency and a quorum of the 12. They really do act, at least in some degree, in unison. That when those top 15 make a decision, that decision, with no real God showing up, with no actual voice of God in the room, they can still, with some sort of reasoning rationale in their head, tell the audience that God has spoken because the quorum of the 12 has made a decision and speaks with one voice.
Yes.
That's
I'm sorry. Yes, this is one of their ways, she writes. But they profess to receive the revelations through the Urim and Thummim, which had been restored to them together with the Book of Mormon. I have seen one of theirs. I wish you would tell us the circumstances, for they have a number. This appeared like a piece of dark soapstone, about 4 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and 1/4 of an inch thick, with a small hole through it near each end. And after she saw it, she said, Heber C, is that your seer stone, or are you just glad to see me? No, I think this is a gorget. This is what Native Americans would wear. They'd put a leather thread through both the holes, then wrap it around and tie it in the back of their neck, I think, tight, in order to protect their throat during battle. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I had AI take the description and create what it thought would be the image of it. So that's an AI rendition of this description. But I remembered the seer stone we had from the Mark Hoffman forgery, essentially, that is very similar. Has a hole on each side. It's about 4 inches long. And it strikes me that Hoffman, who would always, whenever he created a forgery, would always play off of some minutia in the church history in order to create a resemblance to something real, which would have a higher likelihood of being able to fool people. And so when I read this, I thought, oh, it makes me wonder if he based his seer stone there on the right, he based his concept on this description from Catherine Lewis in 1848, like he did the salamander after the white toad.
That's a very interesting idea. And by the way, I did not mean to suggest that just because a stone has been made into a gorget does not mean that it cannot be used subsequently as a seer stone.
Right. It could be both. And then I'll just put a fine point on it and we can move on. But my hunch is that that the brethren knowingly tell the audience that they are speaking the voice of God, knowing that behind the scenes, that secretly means that the top 15 or 12 came to a affirmative decision on something, and that it really has nothing to do with God actually speaking. Okay.
Well, except for the idea that it is out there, and I've heard it, and so have you, and probably everybody out there has heard it too. I'm not saying it's universal, but you will hear it. The idea that, a stake president that I became acquainted with, former stake president, was telling me the story that when he became the stake president, he said to the GA70 or whoever it is who called him, that he was very concerned about, all this pressure and receiving revelation, and how is he going to make sure that what he's telling the members of his stake is what God would want him to tell. And the answer was, don't worry about it, because whatever you say is what God wants them to hear.
Yeah. And it's a misuse of the scripture Whether by mine own voice or the voice of my servant, it is the same.
Because that's whether by the voice of my servant or my own voice, it is the same. On the other hand, if A equals B, then B equals A, right?
In that kind of logic, yes. Yes. All right, now we come to it. This is the temple ceremony. And again, I'm calling it the original temple ceremony. There are so many things in here that were interesting to me, RFM. And if we can just rotate every other slide, and then we'll just pause for a moment. Some of these, there may be something interesting. Some of them may have nothing interesting at all, but I wanted to keep the entire ceremony together. And so I'll just start us off here. The endowment ceremony is described shortly after Joseph Smith's death, approximately 1845, 1846, somewhere in there. And again, I've said it already in the beginning, but this is among the earliest published descriptions of the Nauvoo Endowment. And other than those other accounts, it describes things in detail, which I think those maybe a handful of other accounts that mention it don't do. She goes into extreme detail. And with that, we'll jump into it.
Okay. I'm sorry. You go ahead. On Monday, Mrs. K, Mrs. Kimball, and myself proceeded to the temple. We went up 3 or 4 flights of stairs to the upper story called the upper room of the temple, which is a large hall with 6 rooms on either side for the apostles. Each one has their own office, I think. The hall, for the purposes of initiation or endowment, is divided by canvas into 6 rooms more, making 18 rooms in the whole. So the way I'm envisioning this is you have a big hall, and on either side you have the 6 rooms for the apostles on either side. And in the hall itself, there's a system like there was in the Kirtland Temple of lowering canvas down that is like in squares that create rooms with canvas, sort of like we have in pretty much every church where we've got the what's that partition, the accordion sort of petition that we use as a divider behind the chapel, and we can open it up.
Yeah, the cultural hall thing that slides out. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a similar thing, but with different technology. And so they're going to be doing this in order to create rooms in which to have the temple, but the rooms have canvas for walls. And obviously, you'll be able to hear a lot of what's going on in the next room. 2 of these rooms, separated by canvas, are reserved for dressing rooms, one for males, the other for females. I'm glad to know that, but that leaves what? 4, because that was 6 canvas rooms. 4 remain for the ceremony. One of the apostles' rooms on the right of the entrance and another on the left are used for washing and anointing rooms. The right-hand room for males, the left for females. Mrs. Kimball and myself entered a large entry separated by canvas. So that sounds like one of the rooms in the hall. She, Mrs. K, knocked at a door which was opened by the porter. We went in. She conducted me to the women's dressing room. I was told to remain until I was called to be washed and anointed. While waiting, a company were going through the room called the Garden of Eden, so the garden room, which I'm guessing is a canvas room. This part of the ceremony, any number of persons can go in company, with or without wife or husband. But at the second part, none are allowed to go without a companion. This is interesting. She describes a division of a first part and a second part. The first part is you can go stag. You don't have to be married. But the second one you do, because additional things are going to be happening there involving marriage and marriage to multiple people. I heard language from Scripture and a noise, apparently as if by a man crawling on the floor. These are noises she hears in other rooms beyond the canvas walls. Soon after, I heard singing, what seemed to be a romantic song. The sound was farther off than at first, and I puzzled to know what it meant. Now, it's interesting to me that here she's recalling things that she doesn't know what they mean. So, generally, it's easier for me, at least, to remember things if they're in context with something else to give them, a solidity in my mind. But she's remembering these little snippets of things that she didn't even know what they meant, at least at the time that she's hearing them.
Yeah, and she speaks up a little bit later where she sees this again taking place in one of the other spaces, and she doesn't tell us, she connects the dots, but it's obvious that the two things are the same.
Mm.
And the moment I saw this, I mean, I knew what was going on here. Wednesday, no, maybe it was Monday night. Monday night at the newscast, when I was talking about this episode coming up, I mentioned that this being Willard Richards, it's not, it's W.W. Phelps. But there are multiple references that talk about W.W. Phelps being Satan in the original Temple Endowment. That's the part he played, and that he would crawl around on the floor. And so when she thought she heard a man crawling on the floor, I immediately recognized, like, that's the person playing Satan in another part of the endowment. And the song thing was interesting too. There's a lot of this going on in this ceremony, but it really is a theatrical performance, much more so than even the live sessions in the temple in our time. You know, if you would have gone to Salt Lake when they were doing live sessions, and you would have gone like, oh, like, that's interesting. Well, this is so much more interesting than what the church has done in a long, long time.
My understanding is that in a previous version of the endowment, previous to 1979, which is as early as I intended, that the Protestant minister led the congregation in singing hymns as part of the endowment. And maybe if that, when once again, I don't know if that was going on at this time or if it's some other reason for people to be singing a hymn. And she says, not just a hymn, but sort of a romantic. She's sort of distinguishing it from a regular kind of a hymn. It could have been that, it could have been something else, but that would fit within at least a prior incarnation of the endowment with which I am familiar.
Yeah. And for those who are watching or listening to this, as we go through the rest of us, again, right now, she's sort of on the outside going, I'm hearing things. I don't know what it is I'm hearing. As we go through it, I want you to just recognize how much of a performance this would have been to have observed and participated in this originally, and how interactive it would have been, way more so than how we know the temple to be. Anyway, there were so many moments in this that I sort of smiled and thought, man, that's really interesting how they went about conveying these ideas. Okay, I think you've already done that one. So I just note here, if anybody's ever seen that meme, it's a little video short, but it's the guy who's got the snake hat on. He goes, you know, I'm a snake. I'm a slippery snake. I'm a little snake in the garden. I'm going to catch a mouse. I'm a big snake. So I just took W.W. Phelps and put that snake hat on him.
All of your impressions are starting to sound like Ed Grimley to me.
Yeah, you don't say. Somebody else, Mrs. T.B.H. Stenhouse, she writes the Tell It All, a story of a life's experience in Mormonism. She makes mention about the endowment was treated as theater.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another source that said the same thing as well. But in the Tell It All by Stenhouse, she says, the curse was now pronounced upon the serpent, the devil, who reappears upon his hands and knees, making a hissing noise, as one might suppose a serpent would do. And then in another source, I don't have it written down what this was, but this was another source that said the Lord pronounces a curse upon him, meaning the person playing Satan in the ceremony. He gets down upon his belly and crawls off. And so picture there, W.W. Phelps dressed up like Satan and crawling around on the floor like a snake.
It's not easy to crawl off on your belly, you know. You got to work out to be able to do that.
And several people remarked that W.W. Phelps was the perfect person to play this part. So I don't know W.W. Phelps, but it makes me want to know him, to know what made people think like that's the perfect guy to play Satan. I won't read the rest of this, but folks, if you want, you can pause the screen and you can read that other part.
That must have been hard on the clothes, huh?
Yeah, I'll read this and then you can take the next one. I was called. Yeah, he had to have gotten his clothes dirty about as much as a holy roller, probably. The Pentecostals were jealous. She goes on. She goes, I was called into the washroom to receive my washing and anointing and a new name. The females were attended by females, one of who came to me with a basin of water and began to wash my face, saying, Beloved sister, I wash you with pure water. in the name of the Lord that ye may be clean, etc. And when she says etc., what I assume she's doing is saying, look, I couldn't remember the whole thing, or I'm choosing not to tell it all, but there were more things said. And for those of us who have been through the temple specifically before the last decade of changes, I know exactly what parts she's talking about, and I know exactly what it was like for me, and I know what it was like a little differently for people who went through 10 years before me.
Mm.
Uh, so she's
That
talking.
you may be clean from the blood and sins of this generation, even.
Yeah. Yeah. She says, my companions and myself were required to go into a large bathing tub and wash. Then each had a blanket wrapped around us while we were anointed. And I put the picture in of those tubs. We've made comments here on the show before that in the original temple ceremony, you would get naked, get into the bathtub, and you would be washed. You think it's offensive to put the shield on, RFM, and to be touched near your private places?
The poncho.
Back then it was like, hey, drop them and get in the tub. And you're like, whoa, hold on a minute. Nope. Take them off and get in the tub. And they weren't as soft about you pushing back against things. You'll see that multiple times in this ceremony, that when she is resistant to doing what she's asked to do, she gets pushed back on by the people officiating the ceremony.
I think I'm just realizing something about this picture. First off, what looks like a whip around the doorknob continues to concern me, but on the tub itself, the thing that's sort of floating above the tub, and which I thought was in the tub, and which I was hoping was not electrical in the tub, that is actually a table that is standing on the floor beyond the tub from the picture, isn't it? Between the tub and the wall?
I think so.
Okay, it's just that foreshortening thing that fooled me.
Yeah. So you would get in, and then there's the stool with the little step stool. So somebody could sit up high, somebody could sit down low.
No, somebody can sit up there and the other person can put their foot right there, right?
And get their feet washed.
I think that's why that's especially constructed. But I wouldn't have thought of that except you pointed it out.
Can you imagine going into the temple today and you're not even ready for any of what's happening, and suddenly someone tells you to take your clothes off and get naked into the tub to be washed? To me, that's just insane. So there's
but I did it with just a poncho. I had a great time.
Was your ordinance of washing and anointing different than mine? So I went through in 97. I had the poncho.
Yeah.
Somebody touched me with oil, water, and then somebody touched me with oil, or vice versa. I think it was the water first and then the oil.
The washing and the anointing.
Yep. And they never touched my private areas, but they came close to things. You know, when they touched my loins, it was my inner thigh. Yeah, I think so. I think
I thought the loins was along the lower part of my lower back.
I know, like touching my breast, it was sort of underneath or around it. The ears above, the eyes was sort of above.
Yeah, I was so confused. I mean, they were sticking that oil right in my eye. I don't know who you were with, but seriously, I thought that it was along the lower back where they said the loins, and that confused me forever about what the hell the loins were. I thought the loins are back there. I guess I was wrong.
I'll say this too. Who knows? Because it really is up to each person based on what they were trained to do and based on their healthiness to do what they're told to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Does anybody out there remember the loins being on the backside of the person?
Yeah. Regardless, nobody should have ever been touching me in an ordinance inside a building where a stranger touches me and I have no clue what's going to happen next. That probably should never have been happening. It's probably why it doesn't happen today. Somebody here.
What do they do now? Do you know?
This person said they poked me on the inner thighs for the loins.
Wow. Okay. And I could be misremembering this. It is, I had to have to put a lot of et ceteras in the ordinances as I recall them, just like Catherine Lewis did. Yes, the backside of my lower back. Tim Rathbone. He has his loins on his backside too.
Yeah. Again, people can claim, again, I could be misremembering. That's certainly possible. I'll also say it really depends on everybody's individual experience because you're leaving it up to stranger people to keep something consistent based on what they were taught to do and to do what they were taught to do.
Yeah, they might have personal reasons for variations on the theme.
Yeah, I know one thing. I was really uncomfortable and it did seem strange to me. I can only imagine if I went through in the 1800s, what that would have been like.
Yeah.
Okay, this one's yours.
One of the ordained women, called priestess, begins to anoint. So she's describing her washing and anointing. Another stands by with a horn containing consecrated oil, which she gives to the priestess from a wooden spoon in such quantity and at such times as she is directed. The priestess begins at the head to anoint and blesses by saying, "Sister, I anoint you in the name of the Lord and bless you. I anoint you to be a queen. You shall do the same work in the temple which you now see me do. I anoint your ears that you may hear, your eyes that you may see, your arms that they may be strong, and etc." Yeah, that sounds familiar too.
She then whispers, oh, here we go. She then whispers in the ear a name called a new name, adding, quote, "You must not tell anyone your new name," even though it's the same as everyone else getting a new name that day, right?
I
Or,
don't know if it was back then.
yeah, it should have always been a unique new name, but at some point at least, everybody got the same name on the same day. But she said, "You get your new name until, you must not tell anyone your new name until you get to the veil. It must never be spoken above the sound of your breath. If you ever mention it, the name will be taken away." Unquote. Our names and ages were then recorded. We then dressed and went into the other room and waited.
When the men and women were ready, so now they're out there in one of these canvas rooms in the main hall, I take it. When the men and women were ready, a voice was heard saying, "Hello, Mary." No, the voice was saying, "Michael Jehovah, there is space. Go down, create a world." After a few minutes, the second person said, "I have done as thou hast said." The first person says, "All is good." He pretends to send the second person until all the ceremony of the creation is gone through with. I could not think of a better way to describe in that, what do you call it, thumbnail form, the entire endowment as far as the creation stuff, which goes on and on forever. Then man is found without a helpmeet. The first person says, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will cause a deep sleep to fall on man. Take a rib and make a helpmeet for him." Well, that sounds like it way it was in 1979, Bill.
Yeah, so I depicted here's Elohim directing Jehovah and Michael to go down and create planet Earth. So there's that. Yeah, she described it well. Like that was a really great way to sort of put it into just a paragraph or two. Then a noise was heard in the men's room, but I know not what they did.
What on earth is she talking about?
I have no idea. Somebody,
Heber C. Kimball is always like that after beans.
yeah, I thought maybe somebody was messing with the lockers or something. I don't know. Once in a while you'd be a room away from the locker room and you'd hear somebody close a locker too loudly or something.
Women may not be aware of this, but a lot of times you hear weird noises in the men's room.
Yeah, well, yeah, those are the kinds of weird noises you hear. Too many beans. All right. After a while, it was silent. The doors were open to the men's and women's rooms, and the women called for, who proceeded to the men's room, selected their companion, each for herself, except myself and two others. So what's being implied here is that everybody else had a husband, except for these two women. We don't really get an exact amount of how many of these are plural wives, how many of these are first wives, but it appears as though her and two other people are the only singles in the room.
And this may be an attempt to replicate what's going on in the biblical account where Eve is now created from the rib and Adam's asleep. And so now the women in the endowment are going to the men to select their husbands. as if they're waking him up and bringing him, to his feet or something. I have no idea. That would make some sense to me.
I think that's a really interesting observation, and that makes sense to me too. But I hadn't thought of it until you said it. Then the company marched into what they termed the Garden of Eden, which was adorned with flowers and branches of trees, one of which represented the tree of life, and another the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so again, part of me wishes I could have experienced this once, everything but the bathtub. Experienced this once and at least seen how decorated these sections of rooms were with, again, it's not a real room, it's a partial room separated by canvas from the others, and yet they went out of their way to make each room look something like the room it's supposed to represent. So here's the Garden of Eden room.
Maybe they could have put things or embroidered on the canvas. I don't know.
Yeah. Or just pinned up branches, pinned up flowers. So I created a little image there to sort of give an idea, but the room obviously would be way smaller than that. But there's, at least decorated like a garden room.
While walking around, the guide told us the garden was made for us to dress and keep. While walking around, of all the fruit we might eat, but of the fruit of the tree of knowledge we must not eat, for in the day we eat thereof we shall surely die. I was behind the others, which the guide observing, he came to me and said, walk along with the rest. I looked on him contemptuously, but obeyed orders. It doesn't sound like she's really into this.
No, and she's at multiple points, she says that. She pushes back and sort of doesn't understand to her, it's nonsense. I will say, you said while walking around and then you paused. Yeah, this seemed like it was so much more interactive. Like you would walk into this room and you are sort of acting like Adam or like Eve and sort of taking in the beauty of the garden and getting a chance to walk around the room and observe the various parts of the Garden of Eden. Whereas today we just sit in seats, women on the left, men on the right, and stare straight forward.
And it does make sense because I don't know that they would have had all the seats there in that main hall. It was probably basically vacant space, and then you've got the canvas coming down to divide it up into 6 rooms.
Standing room only. All right, so soon a person appeared frightfully dressed. What does someone look like when they're frightfully dressed? I don't know how you accomplish that.
I'll bet it's Satan, though.
Yeah, he went to the tree. By the way, I think what she means is that it was meant to scare them. He went to the tree of forbidden fruit and plucked the same, and then came to the woman and gave them to eat, saying, take, eat, and give to your husband, etc. When he came to me, I refused and looked upon him with contempt. It seemed so foolish to me. I found there was no time for words, so I took it. I don't remember any part of the endowment where where it was intended for me to visualize being given the fruit or if from the woman's point of view, handing the fruit to a man. Do you have any part of the temple you remember where not just a reference to taking of the fruit, but where it's put on you in first person to give it to someone or to partake of it from someone?
Well, I think that what happened, if this is correct, what happened is that initially it started with every woman portraying Eve and having to go through the dramatic steps that Eve goes through. Every man portraying Adam and going through the dramatic steps that Adam goes through. And sometime between then and 1979, when I went in, that was then systematized. So you can streamline it and just have it done by the characters themselves. And then for the covenants and everything, you can have one woman and one man who symbolically represent Adam and Eve, and everybody else represents them as well. But I just sort of think that what they did was they ritualized the process in order to make it go faster.
But there are still these moments in the temple where you individually are asked to close your eyes and open them, or take your slippers off and put them back on. And this part, like you say, gets put into the witness couple, essentially, even though they're not doing it either, but that the the narrator or the person leading the session essentially mentions that Adam and Eve partook of the fruit, but you don't get this kind of hands-on interaction, which would have made it stick a little more. I mean, this would have been easier for her to remember than for me to remember because she was actively engaged in the ritual of it.
Yes, it is just the men who are told to close their eyes, right? When God brings a deep sleep on them, and then the rib thing happens.
Yeah, I think so. And like you say, in the old one, that would have been made sense by the women going and fetching the man, essentially waking him up.
Yeah, so there's a lot more action going on. It would have been more interesting.
Yeah.
I don't even think they change slippers anymore.
Yeah, they probably don't. I don't think there's veils or funny baker hats or anything. But
And I don't think they change the robes from left shoulder to right shoulder.
Yeah, you'll see here in this one. This is so important as we get to the end of this. Anyway, here's an image of somebody dressed up frightfully and trying to talk the women into getting the men to partake of the fruit. So there's that.
Lucifer looks like the green man.
I'll read this one, but I'll let you take the next one. I just want to note here, because she has so much contempt for the endowment, I just wanted to note, as an effort to be transparent about the opinions that were out there at the time, Stenhouse makes mention about the temple endowment being humorous in parts and people even laughing. So there were several accounts, but this one in particular made mention of participants laughing at portions of the ceremony. And so while you hear Catherine Lewis expressing contempt, I want to note that other people experience the endowment as more entertaining and more humorous and more theatrical than she did.
If I could have played Lucifer, I would have slayed him.
You'd have done great, huh?
Lots of laughter.
Yeah, you would have been
probably why they had to put the injunction in there about no loud laughter. Wait a second. Could it be?
Yeah, that would be interesting if people were doing things to make you laugh and yet you're promising not to laugh loudly.
Oh, no. I mean, that injunction isn't there yet. And the injunction against no loud laughter gets introduced because they were laughing too much during the endowment. And that way, and seeing it that way would make more sense out of it, because the no loud laughter would apply specifically to the temple and being inside of the temple, not being outside.
Yeah, God will not be mocked, huh? Like, these are important ordinances that we're doing. So I just wanted to note that there were other people who's left their witness behind, that they felt less contempt and more entertainment and humor from it. But I'll let you take this one.
Okay, thank you so much. Just jotting that idea down. Hopefully I'll be able to remember that later. If not, I can rewatch, which I'll be doing later tonight anyway. We were then told to hide amid the trees in the garden. There are trees in the garden? They're told to hide there. I'm sure a lot of it's pantomime. For the Lord was coming, and etc. Men and women began to hide, but I stood gazing. So everybody's hiding as well. The guide came and said, "Hide, the Lord is coming." I walked toward the trees by a door. I wonder what these trees were made of. He said, "Go amongst the trees." So apparently you can go amongst the trees. Go amongst the trees, for the Lord will come in at that door. So I moved again. Presently, a person representing the Lord came in, who walked around and said, "Adam, where art thou?" The guide answered, "I heard thy voice in the garden," because the guy is obviously portraying Adam. "I heard thy voice in the garden and was afraid," and etc. She's doing a really good job of remembering this. I know that at this point we're just going along with basically the Genesis account, but she remembers it is in the temple endowment, and it's very familiar to what I went through.
And I'm picturing people walking around being told by the guide to go hide. And so you're trying to find a spot to hide. And she's like, "This is stupid." So she goes and stands by a door, and he's like, "Not there, go hide somewhere else," and it's a strange thing for everyone to be playing the part of Adam and Eve and hiding themselves in the garden. To me, it just is strange knowing my version of Mormonism and my version of the temple that I went through.
I do wonder a little bit about how much of her contempt is being written back into the story in retrospect.
Yeah, that she actually went along with it, but afterward wants to sound defiant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless, that's not the point. The point is the details that she's writing down.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So there I put a little image of everybody hiding and somebody coming in to ask, where is Adam? So there's that. And I kind of picture, the little 8x8 room or 10x10 room and everybody pretending that they're hiding behind something. It just seems a little corny, but I can see why people might laugh. That might have been a part I would have laughed at. Okay. The rest of the ceremonies are recorded in Genesis 3rd chapter with some slight variations. So she does a good job of sort of going like, I don't need to go into detail about the things you guys can read about. This person then cursed the earth, also the one who personified Satan, who goes on his hands and feet and crawls out of the garden. A man and woman were then called to the altar to receive the signs and tokens of the priesthood. The one who is styled God says, by the way, I'll just note too, one of the things I thought was really interesting about her account is she doesn't go into such detail that it seems obvious that she's violating the very temple covenants that she no longer believes in. She seems to be moderately respectful as she tells this experience. And when it comes to like signs and tokens, she doesn't go into great detail.
Well, she tries to describe the first token of the Aaronic priesthood, though apparently she describes the second.
But I mean, she doesn't tell you the handshakes. She doesn't. I don't know if she does like the hand raise. Does she?
Yeah, the tokens. I think the tokens are the clasps.
Yeah,
no, it's a sign.
For whatever reason, I don't remember her going into great
Oh,
detail.
this is the sign. This is the token. Sorry. I
So
hope you didn't see that out there. Oops. Let's edit that out. Okay. This is the sign and this is the token. That's how you know that we are true disciples of Jesus Christ.
True messengers.
True messengers. You got it. Thank you. True messengers of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, sent by Father. A man and woman were then called to the altar to receive the signs and tokens of the priesthood. The one who is styled God says, I knew you would transgress, etc. Before I created and placed you here, I intended you should, but I have prepared a savior for you. And in due time, he will come. Now I will now give you the signs and tokens of the priesthood.
By the way, the man and the woman being called up to the altar and all this, that's exactly the way it was in 79 and up through, but I don't know, whenever the last time I went through the temple. Whilst these, and it probably still is today, but I'm not positive. Whilst these ceremonies were enacted, I heard a noise, another noise. Looking round, I beheld a flaming sword come flourishing in at the door near the tree of life. Is she saying it's really on fire?
She is, whatever she saw, it clearly
made an impression.
Yeah, she interpreted it as a flaming sword. And I'll just say here, Joseph Smith says an angel came with a sword and ordered him to do polygamy. He tells a lot of the women that. I know that this sword is sort of the cherubim protecting the tree, not allowing you to take the tree of life after having taken the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But in a ritual that is enmeshed with polygamy, if the stories were out there about the flaming sword and Joseph having to practice polygamy, this moment would only add pressure to anybody being manipulated into polygamy.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if this was really on fire. I get the idea it wasn't. She says it had a singular appearance and looked like fire, but she was definitely impressed by it. She remembered it. After going through other ceremonies, we were cast out of the garden into another room representing this world. So there's the world room. The only light we had came through the canvas, which separated one room from the other. So that's what the world room is. No independent light within it.
Yeah, it is dark there. So there's that. And so there's your angel with a flaming sword.
I wonder if that was Joseph Smith's old flaming sword.
Yeah. Is that a flaming sword, or are you happy to see me, huh? And there's everybody leaving the garden, some of them with their heads down. The devil came in to tempt us with a vessel of wine, as it was called, I did not taste it. He was singing a vulgar, obscene song. He handed the wine all around, saying, "This is my kingdom. Here you may eat, drink, and be merry." He strutted around singing. Someone came in and tried to get the signs. So this is what I mean. She says I was given the signs and tokens, and now she says someone came in to get the signs, but she doesn't explain specifically what the signs and tokens are, I don't think. She says, soon another came with the gospel and began to preach, the devil contending with him for some time. So again, it would have been so interesting to have been there, seen this person playing Satan, offering everybody a vessel of wine. It doesn't say if everyone turned it down. It does say that she turned it down. And then, as you pointed out, I knew that there was singing in the early version of the endowment, but I didn't know it was vulgar lyrics or sort of inappropriate music, but that would make sense for Satan to be doing that.
I think he may have been singing the old sea shanty. I love to go swimming with bow-legged women.
Good old pirate music. Captain Kidd. Okay. So there's that. And the guy coming in to get the signs, everybody being offered the wine, whether they're drinking or not, or giving it back, who knows? But there's that.
A knocking was heard at the door, upon which the teacher went to the door and appeared to be listening. He returned and said, "Peter has given me the keys of the kingdom, which is to be set up in the last days." Then the devil began to rage and was cast out, leaving the room hissing. By the way, I think it's, if I go back here just a second, all this stuff about the wine and the devil and the singing the obscene and all this stuff here, basically, that's not my experience in the endowment. Okay. All of that is foreign to it. I recognize the devil. The last part, soon another came with the gospel and began to preach. That could be the Protestant minister, but the devil contending with him for some time is different than the Protestant minister that I saw, where he was portrayed more as a dupe or hireling of Satan rather than someone who was arguing with him.
And we won't show this tonight, but there is at least a reference somewhere that the person playing that minister was always represented by a person of color. And had you ever heard that, RFM?
No, I mean, I don't know where they would get them, but I suppose there were a few around. But here's what I heard. What I had heard was this, and it's in the book by. But what I mean is, how many Black Mormons did they have for the role? That's what I'm saying. So I do remember that Gregory Prince, in his book about David O. McKay and his presidency, wrote that when the Swiss temple was being built, the idea was come up with mainly because they would have people speaking so many languages going to it, to have one filmed temple endowment, which is, of course, what we have almost exclusively nowadays. But this was the first, and I think it was back in the 50s, and that they were going to film the endowment, and then they could just dub it with whatever language they wanted, depending upon the language of the people who spoke it. They would all go to room for Italian, French, German. But in the casting process for that movie, I believe it was discussed about having a Black man play Lucifer, but that idea was ultimately dropped and not followed through on. What are you finding, Bill?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because what I found was by the mid 20th century, the script included a line from the minister referring to Satan's black skin. That dialogue was removed in the early to mid 1970s. The removal is well documented in discussions of temple revisions.
I'm not positive I knew that.
I also see here there was a persistent claim that an African-American actor was originally intended to portray Satan in one of the early endowment films. The source from this comes from Spencer Palmer, who portrayed the Protestant minister in the third temple film. According to Palmer, the original plan was to cast an African-American as Satan, but objections from Polynesian Latter-day Saints led to a white actor being used instead. This claim has been repeated by historians such as David John Berger, but it is based on Palmer's recollection rather than surviving production records.
Very
So,
good.
interesting stuff.
Thank you for looking that up.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so let's see here. Where are
Oh, and I had just finished reading that one. I apologize. Yes.
no worries. Knocking the door was heard, upon which the teacher went to the door.
I just read this one.
Okay, you already read this.
I went back to the other one to say that it was foreign to my experience. Here, this idea about going to the door listening did not happen. The devil does begin to rage and does get cast out and does leave the room hissing into a thunderclap, if you're watching the right version.
And I put somebody dressed like Satan on their hands and knees crawling out of the room. So there's that kind of.
It's got to be a tough part when you can't just walk.
Yeah.
I think Michael Balaam had it easy.
All he had to do was break a stick with some performative body language. So he did a great job. Though.
I'd like to see Michael Balaam crawl on his belly out of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Good old Michael Balaam. Soon after this, our robes, caps, and shoes were brought. The men wore shirts over a pair of white pants or drawers and had no other clothing until our robes were brought. Linen caps for the men and muslin caps for the women.
That's interesting.
Yeah. We were then ordered. What? By the way, it's interesting that it's different, but what strikes you?
You know, I'm not so good at fabrics and clothing that I should even be weighing in, but I think of linen as a superior fabric to muslin.
Of course, the men would have to wear hats, and the muslin, they would have to sort of veil their faces. Would muslin be more?
Are we certain that they're veiling their faces? All they're saying is muslin caps for the women.
Yeah, I'm just asking if muslin would be more translucent. I don't know.
I'd be interested in hearing what people out there in the audience have to say in the live chats or in comments about what you think about this distinction that's being made in the description of the endowment by Catherine Lewis, that linen caps were for the men and muslin caps for the women. And she recalls this and makes a specific point of describing it that way.
Yeah. It continues, says, we were ordered into another room, which was called the terrestrial kingdom, and there say after our teacher what he said. So far as my memory serves me, he began by saying, I swear I will sustain the Bible and the Book of Mormon, the Book of Doctrine and Covenants. I will not disclose anything here made known. I will avenge my brother's blood in every possible way.
Up until that last sentence, I would say that's all completely familiar.
Yeah, except you know that the oath of revenge has been removed, and so they would have had it there in the original, but not in the more modern performances of the endowment.
To the men, the teacher said, I will not touch a daughter of Adam unless she be given me of the Lord. Then to the women, I will not have any other man but my husband. The men and women were told to hold up their hands. It seemed so frivolous to me. I did not raise my hand, as I had no husband. I thought it altogether unnecessary. Is she describing a sign, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's probably the covenant to be obedient to your husband, right?
Raising the right hand.
You know, that's the covenant we were making in the temple, the women, of course. But if we go back far enough in time, again, the original endowment was deeply connected to polygamy. And so I imagine the language being different in ways that could allow connections to polygamy. This seems like this is the original form of that, promise to obey your husband as he obeys the Lord. And so you would raise your hand, bow your head, say yes. And she's like, I don't have a husband, so why bother?
By the way, just to make it plain, if it's not already, what the men are supposed to say is different from what the women say. And what the men say allows for more wives than one. But what the women say allows for only one husband and no more.
Correct.
Okay, so I thought it altogether unnecessary to raise my hand, presumably to take this oath of obedience, though we're imposing. The teacher came to me, apparently frightened, and said, "Sister, you did not raise your hand." I smiled and raised my hand, but wondered at his appearance. I have since been informed it would be death to resist.
That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, who knows? Okay. And then this idea of raising your hand to affirm the covenant. And then in the modern day, at least when you went, there's also this practice of bowing our head and
Mhm.
saying yes, right? And I wonder, because she doesn't really make mention ever of bowing a head and saying yes. And that strikes me as very, it struck me enough that I remembered that always that was happening in the temple. And I wondered, at least as a thought, did the bowing your head, there's also parts where they asked you to close your eyes, right? Bow your head, close your eyes, say yes.
I think you just bow your head and say yes, and you close your eyes when you're getting your rib taken out.
But at the very least, when you bow your head, there's less likelihood of you seeing others. And so there may have been, I'm just posing this as a possibility. I don't have any evidence for this, but it strikes me as maybe that if enough people are resistant in the early endowment that this is strange, and like Catherine Lewis, they're like, I don't want to do this. This is weird. It would make sense to add bowing your head in, because then you wouldn't necessarily notice as much of the anomaly of somebody pushing back against what everybody else is doing. But who knows? Who knows? Okay. Um, our shoes and loose clothing were carried to the upper part of the hall. We could not obtain them without going through. There was no way to escape. By the way, that's partially true for us. Like, once you're in the room, you're told you can leave, but you really can't. You have no idea what's coming next, so you don't even know you should leave. And by the time you get going, you're really sort of stuck there until it's over. It would be way out of the ordinary to feel enough resistance to get up and walk out of there. So I'll just note that there was no way to escape. If anyone should attempt it, they would be met by Brigham's Holy Ghost, I suppose, which one of their elders told me was a man standing at the door to knock them in the head with a mallet if they attempted to escape. Now, again, I don't believe that. I'll give the benefit of the doubt that there isn't an extreme threat of violence. I think it's just as reasonable to think that person was sort of joking, because there are people in the temple who use mallets. They are standing next to doors. They are tapping 3 times, and then special, parts of the ritual happen. It makes sense that if someone were to say something about what is that person's role, that maybe somebody would say the joke about a man. That's that man's job is to knock him in the head with a mallet if they attempt to escape. But I will say, I mean, you've already gotten naked and in a bathtub. There are lots of reasons your body and brain should be screaming at you to run away from this.
Maybe that was the origin of the mallet in the first place, and over time it has evolved to become smaller and used only for rapping on doorways.
Very possible. She continues, we were to hold up the heads of the church and obey them in all things and at all times.
Definitely familiar.
We then held up both hands above the head, placed our right hand under the left ear, drew it across the throat. So she does give this one. The left hand was placed to the right shoulder and then drawn across the breast, and the right hand suddenly thrust down to the right side. We then raised our hands again and were taught how to pray.
The true order of prayer, maybe?
Yeah, there's the prayer circle. If you have
Oh
any,
God, hear the words of my mouth.
you must have the best of feelings here. I'll let you get that one. Sorry.
This ceremony concluded, we proceeded singly to the veil. Oh, I love this description of the veil, which is a large sheet separating us from the upper part of the hall, where our clothes were, remember, having 5 holes in it, 2 for the eyes, 2 for the eyes, 1 for the mouth, and 2 for the arms. That's a little different than I've experienced it, Bill. How about you?
That person on the other side would look like the Holy Ghost.
It's like, it's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. You've got the holes for the 2 eyes and for the arms and 1 for the mouth. So you got the holes for your arms to come through so you can do all the stuff that you have to do with the hands.
I'll just say one more thing that there is, I don't have it in here, but there was an early remembrance of the endowment that noticed that when, instead of giving garments with signs on the garments sewn in, the garments were placed on you and some sort of sharp object was used to cut the signs into the material, but also to cut into your skin. And at least in that early remembrance of this happening, again, it's only in one place, there was mention of Emma being not okay with that happening, and it was removed almost immediately from when it was put in. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but there is one source out there, I'll try to find it here in a moment, where the signs of the compass and the square and the little dash mark were actually cut through the garment into your skin. So there's that.
Any connection with the report that they used to use scarlet thread for those? Nope. Okay. Let us know in the live chat. Our instructor, am I reading this? I think I am. The person representing the Lord is on the other side of the veil to take the signs and converse with us. Imagine what he looked like on the other side of the veil, the Lord. Our instructor tells us how to answer, right? Okay. This is all very familiar. Then the Lord asks for the signs. Yes, we give them. Yes, our new name is whispered in his ear. Yes. He then whispers the third name of the patriarchal grip in our ear. Marrow in the bones, strength in the sinews, and virtue in the loins throughout all generations. Well, if that's not exactly what it was at the time, it's close enough to what it is now to say she's got some good information.
Yep. And before I go to the next one, I'll just note David John Berger again said the mysteries of godliness documents that after the garment was placed on the initiate, the officiator cut the 4 priesthood marks into it with a knife. The practice continued into the 19th century before eventually becoming pre-sewn marks. And then in an 1855 expose, 15 Years Among the Mormons by Mary Eddy V. Smith, she wrote down that when the knee mark was cut into the garment, the knife cut through to the knee, making a scar. So there is at least somebody saying at least if the person went too far, it would cut, and Berger acknowledging that they were cut in to begin with rather than sewn in. It seems like with a knife, it would be quite easy to easily cut people. And again, some discussion is that such was intentional to cut the marks actually into them.
Interesting.
Okay, let me move past this one. Did we already do?
That one that was up, we did. Let me just, yeah, I had read that. I read that and said it wasn't exactly what it is today, but it's close enough and to show that she obviously had good information.
All right, so let me go back here. So here it is. This being over, our instructor knocked at the door, which was partly opened by this Lord, who asked, "What is wanting?" The instructor answered, "A candidate is ready to enter." Again, she's not getting the language exactly right, but I'm also not certain that the language is exactly the way it was told to me either. There's also some discussion about how much Brigham and other early leaders worked to try to remember exactly what Joseph Smith had said that was needed to be said in the endowment, and that they were trying their best to remember it and get it right, and that they thought they had restored it pretty closely, if not perfectly, to the form that Joseph had delivered. But we don't know for sure. But she does get certainly the intention correct. So a candidate is ready to enter. He says, "Take off your robe and put it on the right shoulder. Everything appears wrong and foremost in the other world. Take off your shoes. The place on which you stand is holy ground." Again, not quite the same as when I went through, but I know what she's talking about. A motion being made, we entered the place representing the celestial kingdom, obtained our clothes, and went out a different way to our homes. And so with that, her endowment experience is over. And I'll just tackle a couple of other really quick things. She makes a mention of later in her writings that she had a chance to sit down with another ex-Mormon, and she was able to get parts of the temple that she wasn't able to participate in. And then she also had a section where she remembered more.
Right, because all she's describing is the first half of the endowment. She is not permitted to go into the second half of the endowment because she's not married and not getting married.
Correct. She doesn't get to go into the celestial room, right? Does
Did
she?
it say that she did there in that last piece?
Oh yeah, no, yep, she did. She said we entered a place, the celestial kingdom. So she must be talking about something that I'm either unfamiliar with, or she's talking about like sealing ceremonies.
Maybe she is talking about sealing ceremonies and maybe they were like part of the endowment at the time.
Yeah, and we'll see if we can make it out from what she says here. So she says, since writing my remarks respecting the endowment, let me skip ahead here. The first part of which I endeavored to explain, a friend has kindly given me some additional information in regard to the second part. The oath or obligation administered to each candidate on his admission to the order lodge by the Grand Master or his representative, the candidate kneeling at the altar as set forth by Bennett, John C. Bennett. So this sounds to me like a sealing. In the name of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, I now promise and swear truly, faithfully, and without reserve that I will serve the Lord with a perfect heart and a willing mind, dedicating myself wholly and unreservedly in my person and effects to the upbuilding of his kingdom on earth according to his revealed will. I furthermore promise and swear that I will regard the first president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as the supreme head of the church on earth, and obey him the same as the supreme God in all written revelations given under the solemnities of thus saith the Lord, and that I will always uphold the presidency, right or wrong.
See, this is the whole thing about how thus saith the Lord was used to designate something that really, really was from God and you needed to follow it.
And even if a prophet did pronounce it, thus saith the Lord, and was wrong, you should do it anyway. And you promised in the temple to do so.
And then that became a justification for the Latter-day Saints of not following prophets because they weren't saying, thus saith the Lord. So Ezra Taft Benson in 80 or 81 says in his 14 fundamentals that a prophet does not have to say, thus saith the Lord, for his message to be from God.
And one other thing would be that the leaders of the church are so old, I don't know what version of the endowment some of them might have participated in. They might be familiar with some of this language that we are not.
Hmm.
I furthermore promise and swear that I will never touch a daughter of Adam unless she is given me of the Lord. I furthermore promise and swear that no Gentile shall ever be admitted to the secrets of this holy institution or participate in its blessings. I furthermore promise and swear that I will assist the daughter of Zion in the utter destruction of apostates.
Now, daughter of Zion is not a person.
Tell us who the daughter of Zion is.
Oh, it goes under different names. Danites, avenging angels. It's a group of people, men generally, who go out and do the bidding of those who are in charge of them, usually involving violence and threatening behavior in order to have the will of the Mormons accomplished.
By the way, I also know that to be true. I was at one time going to do an episode on the Danites and talk about the daughter of Zion as the early code language for it. And here you have somebody claiming that part of our temple endowment, the sealing or something, somewhere in the temple, one of the ordinances contained us promising to help the Danites destroy the apostates and assist in setting up the kingdom of Daniel in these last days by the power of the highest and the sword of his might. Not a cult, though. It's not.
I can't imagine why people compared Mormonism with Mohammedism.
Yeah. He wonders why. I furthermore promise and swear that I will never communicate the secrets of this degree to any person in the known world, except it be true, be to a true and lawful brother, binding myself under no less a penalty than that of having melted lead poured into my ear. So
Ouch.
help me God and keep me faithful. By the way, I know by the first sentence, people will go, yeah, this isn't Mormonism. This is Masonry, because it's talking about the order lodge and the Grand Master And I'll just note that in my research for this episode, it was pointed out that in the early endowment had so many connections to masonry, and in the original endowment, there is no temple to do it in. And so there would have been more room to see them as somewhat overlapping, and for language around masonry to be used in the original endowment prior to there being a temple built.
Not only that, we all know what the name of the building is, the temple, excuse me, the Masons used for their rituals. It's called the Masonic Temple, right? So it is a temple. It's also called a lodge. I don't know, is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, I don't know, but it would have been reasonable for Mormons to have used Masonic language in describing the space that they did these Mormon/Masonic rituals in. Okay, there's that. And then here.
Oh, by the way, the penalty of death upon revealing the secrets is familiar.
Of having melted lead poured into your ear?
Not that part. That's gotta hurt.
Oh yeah, the penalty signs that they did in the slide before, maybe like cutting from the ear and stuff.
Oh, talking about how that's what happens to you if you blab.
Yeah.
Snitches don't get just stitches. They get molten lead in the ear.
Yeah. But that penalty itself, you didn't hear in your experience.
No, it's just a death penalty is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just note here, this was in a completely different source, and I'm only going to read the red underlined. We were first received past the guard into a private room on the north side of the temple. This was the room of preparation or purification. We were divested of all our apparel, and in a state of perfect nudity, we were washed from head to foot. The last one said, Catherine said she took off her clothes, but she didn't specifically say we were nude. And obviously you need to be nude to get in the bathtub, but she doesn't say it. This source says explicitly we were nude, and then washed from head to foot. It says all this was done by sisters in the church. None others were present. And by the way, right after that, it says it was false to say that men and women were admitted together in an indecent manner. So this person's acknowledging the weirdness of it, but also saying, like, don't take it too far. This was just women washing women, men washing men. That makes it a little better, but I don't think that makes it great. We were then conducted into a room. I'll skip that. We were left by the Lord, and soon a very dandy-like fellow appeared with a black cap on that had a long tail attached to it. I think that's tail. He appeared very familiar. That's because underneath it all was W.W. Phelps. And by his very I don't know what word that is. And
is it insinuating?
Maybe his insinuating and friendly manner induced some of our sisters to eat of the forbidden fruit.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord pronounced a curse upon him. He gets down upon his belly and crawls off.
Yes.
So there we get the tub again. I just wanted to show that. We were then presented with aprons, which we put on about this time. A sword was shook at us through the partition of the room, which was to guard the tree of life.
Huh.
So Catherine noted it as a flaming sword. Here, at least it acknowledges it appears to be a real sword.
And in the Masonic tradition, the Tyler is the name of the officer who is posted outside the temple, the lodge, the Masonic lodge, with a sword while they're conducting their ceremonies in order to protect them from discovery, I believe. And I also think Orrin Porter Rockwell was the Tyler of the Nauvoo Lodge.
Which if you do that, you're intending a certain message to be given, both to scare the people outside and those within. All right.
Yeah, well, these are very, very secret. Nobody's going to find these things out over my dead body.
Yeah. By the way, for those who don't know, at least in modern parlance, we hardly use the word, but a dandy is a feminine male who women find very attractive. It's It's one of the archetypes of seduction is a dandy, and a dandy is generally dressed very feminine, acts very feminine, but is heterosexual, and the women just dig him because he is sort of unique in that way. Um, so let's see here. Immediately, the dandy in the black cap made his appearance. At first, he appeared very sly, peeping about, and when he found the Lord was not present, he became very familiar and persuasive. I thought that was interesting words, the familiar. Some Methodists, some Presbyterians, some Baptists, some Quakers, some Mormons, and some Strangites. So this is when Satan is essentially talking about the other people on the earth who have power. He says, come, let us drink together. In this way, he tempted us and we partook with him. Here I saw some of the 12, and particularly Brigham Young with a white crown upon his head. And as I have since been told, representing God himself.
A white crown, huh?
They were conducted back in possession of our clothing, all save Sister so-and-so. She had a very fine alpaca dress stolen during our absence and has never been able to recover it.
Hence the institution of lockers in the dressing rooms.
Yes, lockers with locks. People have been stealing things in the temple since the beginning of time.
Man, I hope she got that alpaca dress back at some point. Can you imagine how hot that would be to wear in the Nauvoo summer, an alpaca dress?
Sounds too hot for me. I'm not going to read any of this, but if folks want to pause it, they can read the rest of that account. There is
Emmeline.
last page. Emmeline is the one who leaves that account. All right. Promise of violence for disobedience. So this is another moment. We come to the second part of the endowment, which is still more wicked and impious than anything preceding, if it be possible. This is called the sealing, the order of the celestial kingdom. In part, the 12 are commanded to take a plurality of wives. By the way, it strikes me that this is the sealing. The other part, the big part, was the main portion of the endowment. And then when she, unable to go into that second part, and this other ex-Mormon informs her of what that was, it's almost certainly the vengeance oath wrapped around with whatever it was in the original form of the endowment. This seems like this is the sealing, which maybe comes after. So in this part, the 12 are commanded to take a plurality of wives, but lay members are only allowed to take themselves wives with the consent of the 12. Here they seal up men, women, and children to eternal life, as they term it. Men with their wives and families are sealed up to the 12 as children, 40 adopted sons, right? 40 adopted children, and are bound by solemn oaths to obey their parents, the 12, in all things forever. So when you read the earlier account of Kimball, this fits right in and makes so much sense. They never become of age. Those who are adopted in never become of age, but are subject to the apostles as Christ is to the Father. At Nauvoo, I repeatedly heard it said, when we arrive in the wilderness where the law of the Lord can be executed, then the children who will not obey their parents will be taken out of the camp and stoned to death, unquote. Not a cult, though. Did the people know under what bonds and penalties they brought themselves by this sealing? Very few, if any, but the most vicious and depraved would consent to be sealed. But it is wrapped so much in mystery that many submit to its obligations from motives of curiosity, who afterward view them with abhorrence. So there's that.
I wonder if the idea about these adopted children never growing up may, in some sense, account for Joseph Smith's doctrinal shift between promising women that babies and young children who passed away, their children, would be theirs in the resurrection, and they would have the joy of raising them to maturity and adulthood, which is what he said first, and then switching that by the time of 1844 in the King Follett Discourse to the reverse, well, almost the reverse, that mourning women will have their babies again who passed away, but that they will never grow up. They will remain babies throughout eternity, and therefore you have infants on thrones.
Infants on thrones forever. Yeah. One of the most striking things about Catherine Lewis's account is not simply that she describes the Nauvoo Temple ceremony, it's that she repeatedly poses that the temple, the secrecy around it, and plural marriage as parts of the same system. Before she ever entered the temple, she says she was introduced to plural marriage under a strict injunction of secrecy. She was warned not to tell anyone, and later learned that if the doctrine was exposed, those teaching it were expected to deny it. Then, after arriving in Nauvoo, she was told when the temple is done, the plural marriage proposal would move forward. In her telling, the completion of the temple wasn't separate from plural marriage. Rather, it was the mechanism that allowed it to be fully implemented. Whether every detail of Lewis's account is accepted or challenged, her narrative is significant because it independently describes the same pattern found in other Nauvoo sources. The temple was not merely a place of worship. It was where sacred covenants, secrecy, plural marriage converged. And this is exactly the picture that emerged from the William Clayton journals, from the Nauvoo Expositor, and from all the other firsthand accounts that we've talked about repeatedly. Lewis isn't introducing a new story. She's independently confirming one that appears again and again across the historical record. So I'll just note that. And then I wanted to note just some of those sources. Again, Nauvoo Expositor, Joseph Smith's plural marriage, the secrecy, the denials, Martha Brotherton, the recruitment into plural marriage through trusted intermediaries, John C. Bennett, the secret proposals, the coded language, the concealment, the punishment for the backroom deal when it became public, William Clayton's journals, temple completion tied to plural marriage, Heber C. Kimball's role in all of that, the Nauvoo Temple ceremonies, Helen Mar Kimball's family salvation used as a reason to accept sealing, Nauvoo Temple endowment accounts, washing, anointing, new names, signs, tokens, penalties at the veil. Again, polygamy and the endowment were tied at the hip in that original endowment, and you can see more of polygamy in that than you would see in the modern temple ceremony. And then I put the conclusion in her words. She says this at the very end of her account. RFM, would you mind reading this? I'll go one more slide further. This is what she ends her story with.
There are thousands of honest, well-meaning Mormons who know what I have written is true in substance, but who probably never gave the subject one moment's serious consideration, leaving such matters to be discussed by the apostles and elders, as if it did not concern them. The leaders are a selfish, vainglorious set, and more to and more to be dreaded than a band of pirates, because people are deceived by their great pretensions to piety under the most sacred garb of the priesthood, while they trample underfoot the laws of God and man.
And then you, by the way, I think she does that beautifully, sort of noting our gullibility as believers, how much power and unhealthiness the leaders have, and how all of that works to lead a large group into doing what the leaders want them to do. And then you found a couple of things that I thought were interesting.
When I read through it, you did a great job of culling out the things that were mainly of interest, I think, from this pamphlet, which is around 21 pages long. This is something that helped me realize that the more things change, the more things stay the same. They're doing the same kind of thing today as they were back in the 1840s, at least as regards this goes. A small pamphlet, she writes, a small pamphlet called a circular was sent out through the eastern and middle states. This is after she's left, warning the churches, among other things, to guard against those who had left them, telling them not to spend an hour in talking or hearing self-righteous hypocrites retail slander or foolish tales respecting the brethren, who have to suffer every reproach and danger. Give the brethren a break. Give them no place nor quarter among you. And this is the way they dupe their members.
Yeah, same way it happens today, huh?
No, and I think I have an example of that.
Yeah.
After this, there's a video clip after this one, Bill.
Okay.
This says a similar thing from a different place in the pamphlet. News was brought me at St. Louis. That's where she had fled to. News was brought me at St. Louis stating a letter had been received at Boston, where she was from originally, right? From Nauvoo. So she splits without giving any advance notice, or hardly any, because if you do, then they take measures to trap you, keep you from leaving. So she goes to St. Louis, but they figured she was in Boston because that's where she came from, the church at Boston. So news was brought me at St. Louis stating a letter had been received at Boston from Nauvoo, in which I was called, dun dun dun, an apostate. This was done to prevent any influence I might have had amongst them on my return. They threatened to excommunicate any member who visited, talked, or listened to, or with an apostate, because such, they say, are unworthy of belief. You can't trust those apostates. You can't trust those non-members, especially ones who used to be members and now aren't. So under the heading of the more things change, the more they stay the same, remember these words from President Nelson not so long ago.
When someone you love attacks truth, think celestial and don't question your testimony. The Apostle Paul prophesied that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. There is no end to the adversary's deceptions. Please be prepared. Never take counsel from those who do not believe.
There we go.
Seek guidance from voices you can trust, from prophets, seers, and revelators, and from the whisperings of the Holy Ghost, who will show unto you the things what ye should do.
The only question I'd ask is, if it causes you concern the way that Catherine Lewis wrote it in her 1848 publication, it should probably cause you about as much concern when you see the president of the church saying the same thing in 2023.
Yeah. And if your system is unhealthy and is not true, how else would you find it out if you can't hear any voice of any person on the outside who would say as much?
Well, fortunately, you don't have to find that out because you already know it's true.
Exactly. All right. That's the end of the stuff tonight, but we do have a couple people in studio to share their thoughts. Tim Rathbone, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you liked it.
And ending with Emmeline is very appropriate.
Is that a body reference of some sort that I'm not getting?
No, but she's the earliest. Hers, if I remember right, hers is the earliest recollection of the endowment. Bennett never went through Joseph Smith's endowment. What he wrote in his book, he got from others.
You're breaking up, Tim, but do you know if the Emmeline is Emmeline B. Wells? Is that who we're talking about?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Something tells me it's spelled differently, but I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. But
Yeah. Yeah, no worry. You're breaking up.
Yeah, Emmeline B. Wells has two M's. Did the other one have one?
Yeah, it did.
yeah, I see I'm breaking up a bit.
You are. We're going to have to let you go, my friend.
I'm
Well,
sorry, Tim.
Everybody should get and read this book, Light on Masonry by Bernard. Everything about the endowment was taken from a lot of Masonry. So.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. How big is that book? That looked awfully big.
Well, it's Art DeHoyos went through, and Art and I copied the copy of this book in BYU Special Collections. And then when Art became the archivist for the Masons, he went through and found the original manuscript, and he had lots of notes and things in it and other pamphlets. It's quite extensive. It's very thick.
I hope it has pictures.
2 inches. Yeah, it does. It has drawings. It has
Great.
drawings.
Masonry, otherwise known as the corrupted endowment.
That's right.
Okay.
A
Have a
book
great.
that long should have pictures. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, it should, huh? All right, Tim, take it easy.
You too. Take care.
See you Friday.
Brittany, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent.
Yeah. I took notes.
I love it. Hopefully,
Yeah.
is that book we just saw?
The Light on Masonry.
Yeah.
It's the Light on Masonry letter.
I've actually been looking. I want to learn more about Masonry, so I was like, that's perfect. I need that recommendation. Awesome timing. But maybe a smaller book first. I don't know.
No kidding. Isn't it kind of intimidating?
Yeah, and it's just hard to like feel like I'm gonna get through it, finish it, and get it done. I'm on Under the Banner of Heaven, and I've been on it for it's late now at the library, so
Just watch the movie.
I did.
That's what I did.
Or I watched the TV series. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. With
It's
Andrew
really good.
Garfield.
It was really good, but I wanted to read the book. It's a good book, though. Great book.
It's so good. You raced right through it. You couldn't put it down.
The series, yeah. The book. Apparently I keep stopping.
That's how good it is. It's a real page turner, I hear.
Actually, it is a good book. I get really busy, and I pick up other books. I read more than one book at a time. So yeah.
You're one of those people.
I apparently am. I don't know. I'm trying this out, trying to be smarter and more
I know people who
educated.
do that, but now I know another one. But I've never ever been a person who could read multiple books at once. It's hard enough for me to read a book at all. And if
It's
I'm going to
not
read one, it's everything I can do to keep track of what's going on in the book between the time I put it down and the next time I pick it up. And if that's more than a day or two or a week, then I'm really going to have to go back quite a ways and reread. So I can't even imagine of reading a book and then before I'm done with it, starting another book and having to keep track of two things.
Yeah. Well, I think the hardest part is just managing the library rentals, and thankfully I don't get fined in my county, so I'm
You
all
don't?
good. Yeah, my county doesn't fine.
How do they get
St. Louis
people to
County.
bring the books back?
I don't know.
It sounds like anarchy.
I have one that I think I lost. It's called. It was like how to something about if the gnomes attack. I don't know, something about that. And it was a nonfiction.
Is this by R.L. Stein?
No, I don't know who's by. I bought it or I borrowed it for my kid since I homeschool. So
I think R.L. Stein wrote a couple of books about gnomes.
I don't know.
The first one was so
Anyway.
popular.
I don't
I'm
know.
talking about Goosebumps. I'm trying to talk about Goosebumps. Those are written by R.L. Stein, right?
Oh, yeah. I remember I read Goosebumps as a kid.
Yes. You remember the gnomes?
I don't remember the gnomes. I remember being scared enough to stop reading it.
Good. Do you remember Slappy?
Yes.
That was
That
the
sounds
ventriloquist
familiar.
dummy, wasn't he?
I don't like ventriloquists.
I hate the dummies,
No, not for me.
which is why Jacob Hansen will never have me on his show.
What were some of the notes that you made?
On topic. Let's see.
Hmm.
Here's some things I wrote down. Oh. I wrote down the women, inviting the women into plural marriage. That's very cunning. The more I learn about some of these gross people, the more I realize they have systems in place. They know exactly what they're doing. So that's creepy, and I don't like how manipulative it is.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you have to get in that circle and they say you have to have the best of feelings,
Yes.
sometimes I'd have to think about it. Like, can I go up there? Like, who all is in this room and who's going to get up in the circle?
I want to know out there, and from you, Brady, okay, and out there in the live chat, I want to know, has anybody ever voluntarily absented themselves from the prayer circle even though they would have otherwise, because there was somebody in the circle that they didn't have the best feelings toward.
Oh, my husband, for sure.
He wouldn't go to the prayer circle. Oh, very good. Zing. Good one.
Well, like if we were in there and I was there because we were having a fight.
Yes, very good. I like that one.
Yeah. So that was a note. Let's see. Oh, the temple, as you're describing this, it sounds more like imaginative play. Like they're like very involved in the process. I am impressed at how she was. What was this person's name? Catherine.
Catherine Lewis.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Honestly, like I love the honesty and how weird it all was. It's kind of like I don't know. I love that this document exists. It's really fun to listen to, like, hear the interpretation, because yeah, that's weird to experience. It was weird for me in 2010. I can't imagine.
They break the fourth wall so much that eventually you just have to decide that you're part of the play.
Yeah. I think I was saying this recently. I'm really glad they sat us separately from like our husbands, because when I did like my husband, if I had to sit next to him during the first time we went through, I would have laughed for sure. There's no way I would have whispered, "What are we doing?" But being surrounded by, people from your ward and people who are all there to support you. The whole room was people there to support us because we didn't have family to support us. So, and his mom was there. Yeah.
So you were sitting next to your husband's mom?
Yeah. Yeah. She was the only member in our family. Yeah. So that was intimidating.
It must have been a big day for her.
Yeah, definitely, because it was her only son. She had 4 kids. She had another kid that she had adopted out through the Mormon adoption program, actually. So, but he was the only one that and was active, and stuff like that. So didn't end well, but what do you say?
Do you sense a familiarity when you read or hear read what it is that Catherine Lewis wrote down in 1848 from your experience with the endowment versus hers?
Yes. Not only in like the things that she's saying that we do, but in like the the feeling of how freaking weird it is, that kind of comes with it. Just the honesty of what she's sharing, and it's weird. Nobody crawled on the ground in my version.
I feel like you missed out.
I know. I really loved the Satan, though. It was my favorite character.
Yeah, he is the most interesting of everybody, huh?
Yeah.
Better to, what is it? Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven, or something like that. He always gets all the best lines, whether it's Paradise Lost or the Temple Endowment.
Yes, he does. He really
He
does.
also gets the most mysterious line. What are you doing? And he says, that which has been done on other worlds.
Yeah.
Leaving generations of missionaries scratching their heads in puzzlement.
Yeah, he's funny, honestly. It's like I went to the temple a lot. I'm very patient. So I watched those videos many times, and I've watched them since as an ex-Mormon. So it was fascinating. I have some of my favorites.
You've
I think
seen
the best.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the best thing I've heard said about the endowment was that it's a good thing that it's secret, because if it weren't, everybody would just look at it and say, what is the big deal about this? Is so boring.
Especially the beginning.
Oh, yes. I understand they've truncated that a little bit. They've shrunk the 6 days of creation down to at least 3 by now.
It's very repetitive.
You saw the little short funny thing with the guy with the snake mask, right? I'm a snake. I'm a flippy snake.
I haven't. You know what? I think your impression is really good.
I think this was a bad dream you had. I think this was a dream. This was an ayahuasca dream you had, Bill. Nobody knows what you're talking about.
Here, I'll just I'll move my screen over, and you can at least see
Oh, we get to see your dream.
I can play it. I think we'll get in trouble if I play it, but
Mm.
right there. Here, I'll put the mute on for a second.
What on earth?
Here,
I'm a
I'll
snake.
what the hell?
Let's live dangerously.
What was this year?
Ow, careful, kitty.
35
Oh, good
million
yawn. Oh my God.
views.
Snake. I'm a snake. I'm a snake. I'm a snake.
My gosh, I didn't realize Dives had a new video out.
Anyway, I want people who don't know that to at least know I was playing off of something that was actually real.
There you go. I've got no idea how it came up in your feed or why you were spending your time watching it, but that's your business.
My kids have watched that for years. So
35 million views. Where have you been?
all of us have seen it, but you, RFM.
I've been watching the Baby Shark video.
There you go. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for coming on.
No
Appreciate it.
problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. have a-
Yeah, great to see you.
Bye.
Love your decor. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, that's all I've got, RFM. Any final thoughts from you? And we'll get out of here. We've gone quite late tonight.
I think Baby Shark's well over 1 billion. It might be 2 billion by now. Nobody beats Baby Shark.
Do, baby shark, do.
I couldn't believe they had a B in, YouTube views. 1 billion, geez. Wow. I mean, it's a catchy song and everything. I've got nothing against the song, but 1 billion. Wow. That's a lot of views.
Anyway, any last thoughts from you, my friend?
I think this has been a lot of fun. I think that a whole lot of the endowment, and by the way, she also talked about Peter, James, and John being represented in a different part that we didn't get to tonight. There's a lot of the endowment that we have today, or at least we had in 1979 when we still had the penalties and all the good stuff, that is recognizable from what it is that she's talking about. So it makes me think that she's probably got a pretty good memory, which makes me more inclined to believe the things that she says that I don't have an immediate referent for in my memory.
Yeah, I think she did a great job of telling it. Obviously, she probably didn't get it perfect. It certainly looks different than some of the things I would have expected her to say, but she gets it close enough that there's no doubt in my mind she went through the temple. Her experiences with the Kimball family, I think, are really enlightening if we want to understand some of the things going on behind the scenes with polygamy and Mormonism.
And in the rest of her pamphlet, Kimball, Heber C. Kimball, he's like a dog. He is after her, and he will not stop talking to her about it and saying, well, it's okay. It's okay. You'll change your mind.
Yeah. And I think it's all too easy for the believer to dismiss anyone and everyone who's critical. But maybe, just maybe, it's those voices outside the church that are telling you the truth about what goes on here. And I think Catherine Lewis was one of those who, at least according to her story, was quite brave and adamant, standing up against them, and eventually left. So kudos to her for whatever degree that's true.
Yeah, regardless of the manner or how bravely or whatever, or how contemptuously she handled these situations, she got out. She left. She ran. She didn't walk. She ran to St. Louis to get away from these guys who were trying to marry her plurally and putting the pressure on her all the time. So finally she says, I'm out of here. And she left. And then she wrote about it and it was published. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm going to close it out, folks, but I do want to ask, please do like and please do subscribe to the channel. But more importantly, we really do need donations. You've heard us saying it a lot lately, but we really need some of you to step up. We put out the content. It's free for everybody to watch. But for those of you who feel inclined, for those of you who have the means, go on to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button. I'll put the link in the chat right now and you can see it there. But if you'll click there, and just a $5 or $10 donation recurring every month means the world to us, and RFM and I will keep doing it. We'll be back next week, Wednesday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, for the next episode of Mormonism Live. RFM, you've got a show, Mormonism After Dark, of course, on Friday, and you've got a show I think you're working on for Saturday as well.
True. And on Mormonism After Dark, please join us. We're going to have Sandra Tanner. I just secured her this afternoon. We confirmed, I'm pretty sure she's going to be on the show to talk about when she and her husband got sued over the William Clayton journals. It is a story that keeps giving. So that's definitely in the news, and she's going to be talking about it, and she'll hang around, and you can join us on the stage and talk with Sandra Tanner and ask her whatever questions you might like.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. And then you've got Radio Free Mormon on Saturday. And then we'll see everybody Monday for the newscast, and then back around the corner for the next episode of Mormonism Live. Everybody have a great night. Thank you to all those who do support the show, and we can't wait to see you till next time. Bye-bye.
Good night.